no support for it. Oh, Rob?
Yeah, I'm in support for it.
Oh, excellent.
I think getting interesting young minds interested in global things is crucial.
It is crucial. So I think it's the sentiment of the board that will support this request for the Model United Nations at a level of $300.
And I only suggest that because I don't think I even realized last time that it was 40 students, and trying to organize a trip for that many individuals was quite a bit.
It's not 40 students from Aspen High School, though, I don't believe. It's 40
I
students
made it
from
sound
around
like that
the
from the
state.
letter. 40 from around the state.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thought they had. I'm trying to see if they have. I don't see that they have how many participants.
Anyhow.
Well, he does say 40, but he does say students, but he doesn't say from where. But nonetheless, I still think that $300 is.
But I would also, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I would also be interested to know if the other students, where they come from, and who else is actually helping, contributing. It'd be nice to know that as well.
But that isn't a prerequisite.
No.
But informationally, it'd be nice to, if we get a presentation, I think we'd also look forward to a presentation, a post thing, and they can give us those statistics that George asked for.
The next NOI is a letter of thank you from the Aspen Valley Medical Foundation. That's for the $1,500 contribution to the homeless shelter. So, then the third item, I'll ask Cindy and Mike to come up on. We wanted to give you an update on how we're doing with the permitting on the estates. You guys are moving along a little quicker than we anticipated, I think.
Should we debate the Model UN a little more?
Yeah, we should do
So, thank you for being here. It says here there's a special event permit for ESPN Winter X Games, and Mike Kramer, planner, is the staff responsible. And Cindy's also here, so thank you for being here. Mike, do you want to go ahead and give us a presentation?
Yeah, I'll do a quick outline of the memo which we have, just a quick one-pager. The ESPN Winter X Games are proposed for January 26th to 29th, as always around this time of year. And staff has received their special event application, a major special event application. And we convened the special event committee in early December, as typical fashion when we always do. And we discussed the proposal, and there aren't really a lot of changes from last year and previous years. Of note, as far as the event goes, they're not going to have the snowcross, which is a snowmobile race. They're only going to have the snowmobile circling through the air flips event for X Games, in addition to all the other proposed events that have like the skier cross and snowcross and all that. Last year, ESPN had a new vendor for security, and their vendor is called Premier Executive Solutions, and they are a company out of California that also works during the summer X Games too. And last year was the first year that this company and vendor was providing service to the X Games, and it sounded like everything went really well. In fact, the Sheriff's Office commented that there were no issues or concerns with how the operations went from a safety standpoint last year. So we are going to ask for final sign-offs for the permit this week, and we'll issue a special event permit administratively through our department with all appropriate sign-offs.
And just one thing to add is that we anticipate doing a debrief with you after the event.
Let me ask you, Mike, when you said that you're going to ask for sign-offs from various referral, what does that mean?
Sure. What that means is that when we convene as a special event committee, we get an initial review of the application, and it's in writing, and they provide maps and basically representations of what their event will be like. And then the special events committee gets a chance to ask questions of the applicant. And if there's any issues, or if for example, like if we're talking about, how many buses and the schedules for the events during the X Games, the applicant has the ability to go back and rework that part of the application, get back to the interested party, and when I send a final call for sign-offs, that means that the interested party would then comment back to me and say that everything is okay. And then we take that in writing and have that in the file, and whatever conditions are applied are applied.
Do you have a list of those referral people? What, can you remember off the top of your head?
There's like over 30 of them, I think.
Give me like 5.
I'll give you the heavy hitters. Obviously, are RAFTA, the City of Aspen, and their various departments like parking and the APD, Aspen Police Department, our Sheriff's Office, our Emergency Manager, Tom Grady. We also refer it out to the Colorado State Patrol, CSP. We have the City Special Events Committee, the Aspen Skiing Company, various homeowners associations that would be affected by the events, like the Buttermilk Metro District. We also refer out to the airport, and that's just some namely ones that I can remember.
Okay, so it's a community-wide outreach to make sure that whatever impacts are going to happen at the X Games, that people are aware of that and can plan for it. Okay. Any questions from the board? Jack?
Yeah, and including the hospital?
Hospital is always referred, yes.
Your second paragraph, you say no concerts at the venue or in the city of Aspen have been proposed at this time. I thought 3 weeks ago or so, the first in the series of Bud Light concerts was going to happen during the X Games. That's not factual, apparently, or...
I don't know about the Bud Light series. The sentence I wrote was regarding X Games concerts, either at the venue or if you heard some of the rumors about the one at the city, at Wagner Park over there. And I'm not sure about the Bud Light series. I'd have to look into it.
Yeah, I mean, that's city of Aspen downtown, so I just don't know how it relates. But I thought I did read, we might just check in and see.
Yeah, I can do
because
that.
it's whether it's part of the event or separate, but during the same timeline, then we still have somewhat analogous, the people getting from Buttermilk to town in a safe way, and something we've always, of course, been concerned about. We don't prefer people on the street, on the road, whatever. Thank you.
Rachel?
Yeah, I agree with Jack's comment, just to scope it out, because that was where we had issues before with people trying to get in town in time for the concert and deciding to walk across the Olympic Bridge, things like that. The only 2 things I have are just comments for you to the security team, and they're the same I kind of make every year with this, is I'm always concerned about crowd management to make sure there's not a potential for a crush factor or a trampling factor at the base of the event. I was there once, and it was years ago, so I'm not sure how well they've cleared that up, but it just seemed kind of hazardous if someone wanted to pull back, and it was very, very tight. And then the second is to not only do the door, preparations for no alcohol-free event, but to have some people within the crowd and going up the half pipe, because the one time I was there, I did witness some underage drinking. Actually, not the drinking. They've already finished with that. I was seeing the behavioral side effects up on the half pipe. And so they need to really make sure that they're within the crowd and not just at the gate. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mike and Cindy?
Just a little bit of one last comment, then I was going to leave it open, but it seems like next year we might want to look at our timelines a little differently. I mean, the advertising's on for the event. They're building the stage. It's not as if, without being a true spoiler, we were going to deny the application or put additional conditions on. So I think in future years, if we're fortunate enough to have the X Games continue here, we need to back it up in terms of our input or meetings about it.
How does the board feel about that?
My impression is that they started this months and months and months and months ago, and my impression now is that staff, loose ends are tied up, they seem to have okay by everyone, and you're just reporting into us here today. It's not like there were decisions to be made this last week. I mean, they did do their homework and get in early, right? That's been
They have been.
protocol.
My term here with the county is they have been very good with submitting their application and addressing the concerns we've had. And they have really nailed this process down. One of the best applicants we have.
Yeah, my comment would be, if we sense that there's something out of order, absolutely, Rachel's right. I'm sensing we're okay, but they need every year, year after year, of course, perform like they have.
So, Mike, when did they start the process?
I think that, if I recall, was submitted sometime in like late November, somewhere around there. Maybe even like mid-November.
Does that leave sufficient time for community development and the rest of the...
Actually, I got it here. Late October they submitted, October 27th. Plenty of time, yeah. If they were submitting like now, we would definitely have an issue with that, which sometimes we get from special events. But they have personnel dedicated to submitting the application, and Vanessa Anthes is the representative we work with from ESPN, and she's great. She submits on time, addresses staff's concerns, and this moves smoothly, the process.
So does that satisfy your concerns, Rachel?
It does, and it's possibly just a little more earlier on our schedules, our involvement, not so much, and maybe the debrief afterwards will take care of any questions I would have.
So, okay. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, Cindy and Mike.
Thank you.
Cindy, can you stick around?
So, future agendas is our next item. I didn't get a packet for future agendas.
It's not on the online, Michael? Okay, well, I apologize for that. Right now, you'll see that next Tuesday on the 24th, there may be some moving around or in addition. We have an hour from 2:15 to 3:15. That's not been filled. That had to do with some of our moving around of the item this afternoon on medical marijuana and such. So we're holding that open, but you may see when that agenda comes forward that we may be ending a little bit earlier, or we'll have another item that we want to plug in there. Again, our retreat is February 2nd and 3rd. We have blocked out from 8:30 to 5. It's likely that we'll end earlier than that each day, but I think right now, as we're planning that retreat, blocking out that time makes sense. Other than that, I do not have any items for you on future agendas today.
Are there any board questions about future agendas? George?
A couple things. One is, Phyllis, we talked earlier about plugging in the time as we go forward for our next opportunity for the board to get together in exec session for personnel review. So I'll make a note of that. The retreat, I was assuming the retreat will actually probably start at 9 because I usually take the bus in, so I'll be here about 8:45, 8:50.
Start breakfast at 8:30.
I still don't see, and I had this on a future agenda several weeks ago, and I mentioned this to you, John, that I still don't see, we were going to have a resolution for our
The climate change.
resolution.
And we had that on a work session. Susan's actually going back, she's talking to Ellen this morning. Do you have an update on that?
Susan sent me an email, and I
Okay.
just didn't have a chance to open it yet, but I know we haven't forgotten it.
Okay.
So, and it was, George, you're right, it was on work sessions, and it did come off, and so we're looking into what happened there.
And we may be able to swap it. I know that on the future agenda, John, we have the AACP which continues to move along. So we may be able to swap those out.
And the last comment, it could be into open discussion, but we haven't had any citizen proclamations in a while, and I think I would just encourage board members to think about citizens or events that we can recognize in this community. We should be able to at least come up with one a month. There's so many good things that are happening in our community to recognize those who are involved in them.
If I could, Michael, would the board like us to just solicit, even if it's just shooting out an email to you guys as a tickler to see if there's a citizen proclamation that you'd like us to consider for future agendas? Would that help with that discussion, maybe?
Well, I think it's. I mean, George has made the point that we as a group can. I don't think we need an email.
Okay.
I think, for me, being new on the board, something that would be nice is maybe, if this is easily accessible, I don't want to create too much work, but a list of all the proclamations over the last, 2 years. Because it'd be nice for me to see what sort of people, what sort of, and it'd be nice to refresh my memory on who's gotten that sort of.
Pat Bingham probably has a collection of that. If you just visit with Pat Bingham, she'll go over it with you. I think that's a great idea, George. George has asked a couple of times now for that global warming to be on the agenda, so I think we really need to get it on the work sessions soon. Okay. Any other future agenda items?
Just clarification, February 8th, Employee Appreciation Day at the Rio Grande, I assume it says Rio.
Rio Grande.
Yes, Rachel?
Yeah, just as kind of a future heads up, I'm anticipating being out of town the week of May 14th. So I know I will miss that Tuesday, the 15th work session. It's a week with just a work session, so I will not be missing a regular, but that's the NACO Western Interstate Regional Conference is coming up. And there's one other, but it just slips my mind right now. And we already have when I'm gone for the main NACO in March. I know it is. Perhaps just internally, you could start checking with department heads if there's specific issues that you would like me to visit with our legislators back when I'm in D.C. in March, so that it's not a scramble in the last week or 2 weeks and preparatory information or things like that. I'll work with Susan Murphy to set up some individual appointments for while I'm back there. There's one day when the whole Colorado delegation, that's the 7th, will be on the Hill and carrying the CCI message, but there would be time separate from that for specific issues to Pickens County. Thank you.
Any other items of future agendas? Jack?
Question, Rachel, when are we going to have our caucus for Club 20? Is that this year or is it next year?
Pickens County will come up this year, but that date has not been set. They'll probably get in touch with me for when I'm in town and try to schedule something around it. Frankly, it's always very minimally attended. And last time was when 60, 61, and 101 were on the ballot, and we used it as an opportunity to educate people who wanted to know about those issues with the Club 20 presentation. Are you thinking you'd like it to almost be part of one of our work sessions or something to kind of...
No, I just think that when we do have a date, whenever it's provided, we ought to, as we typically do, but what I'm unsure is how much is advertised, so there's participation, because there's more than just one representative, right? There's a couple
Well,
from the county.
yeah, they're elected by the members of Club
the
20
caucus.
within the county. Our membership is very low within the county. We have Club 20 members, such as the Forest Service, but they only get to claim one county to go to vote. So they usually claim where their home office is or something like that. Same with some of the larger banking institutions and things like this that are spread throughout western Colorado. I think the city and Aspen are the two major participants continuing in this county at this time.
Well, we appreciate all your work over the years. It's just one way to keep in touch, even though we have heartburn at times. But they have evolved to a more reasonable, at least more representative organization, and I think that goes a lot to say with participation by certain individuals that help broaden the conversation.
Any other future agenda items? Shall we move on to open discussion? John?
And we left quite a bit of time on the agenda for open discussion today, partly because we have the final draft of our comments on the Bureau of Land Management's Resource Management Plan. I think. Are they hot off the press, Ellen?
Yeah. Final is a frightening word.
Okay, and almost final. And I think we wanted to take one more opportunity to speak with you about those, and also to clarify. Last week, there was an article, I believe, last Wednesday in the Aspen Daily that we've had to do some explanation on in terms of clarifying our comments, so we thought we'd take a moment also for the purpose of clarity with the public to explain those differences, and then if there's any discussion on the almost final version now of our comments, they do have to be in today, and so we wanted to leave some time on the agenda to talk about this.
So, Ellen and Cindy, are you going to review these final comments, or at least highlight what some of the final comments are? Thank you.
I think what we'd like to start off with is that we feel that we've incorporated all the comments from your last meeting, and then what we found as a result of some of the articles that came out in the newspaper over the last week was that some of our comments really weren't as specific as they could have been relative to the Division of Wildlife recommendations, and so we have revised the comments to be specific. We have not changed the position. You have seen the Division of Wildlife comments as part of your packet, but what we're doing is we're being more specific in our body of comments about specific winter closures, areas that aren't closed, areas that are closed on BLM parcels. So we wanted to make that a lot more specific in the comments so that there wouldn't be as much confusion. So I think that's one of the major changes since we've talked that we wanted to talk to you a little bit about. And just so the public knows, I think what happened in the first couple articles was that we said winter closure of Light Hill, winter closure of Albany-Kittle, and there was confusion about the fact that the Division of Wildlife at this point, what they're recommending and what we've said we will support throughout an interim process with a larger look at a resource management plan for each individual parcel, was that on Light Hill there would still be access in the winter off of East Cypress Creek Road to the top of the hill on the East Cypress Creek Road, and also the gateway access from the gateway subdivision to the top of the hill on Light Hill. Albany-Kittle, very specifically, the Division of Wildlife has requested that, in fact, there be closure at the lookout point at the top of the Albany-Kittle Trail, because beyond that point, they feel that there's disturbance to the winter range and winter habitat. So that's where we're heading, and from an interim perspective, being supportive of the Division of Wildlife comments, and also, as you will probably recall from the comments, we are supportive of an adaptive environmental approach with a carrying capacity management plan being developed for the Crown, for Light Hill, and for Albany-Kittle as three very specific areas. And also as participating or cooperating agencies, with Alan and myself and George being on that committee with BLM, they've asked us to comment specifically on whether or not we'd like to continue to participate in the final version of the environmental impact statement and the resource management plan. And in our cover letter that we're still developing today, we will acknowledge, in fact, that we do want to stay involved in the process if that's what you wish us to do, and hopefully be able to express our concerns about coming up with these specific management plans.
Face-to-face, which will be, I think, a real opportunity.
Cindy, what were the concerns of the Parks and Wildlife about impacts on Light Hill and Albany Kittle?
Light Hill, like many of the BLM properties, is sensitive winter range for deer and elk, and also there's some calving habitat on Light Hill, and the concern is that there's a lot of scattered use on human use and dogs on the property throughout the winter that disturb the wildlife. And there's a couple things that are happening according to some of the studies that I've read and what Kevin has been able to tell us.
Kevin Wright of the
Parks and Wildlife with the state of Colorado. They talk about what I've always called as social trails, or some people in this plan it's called bandit trails, where trails are just kind of created by individuals and then time after time get used again, and that fragments the habitat in a way that is very sensitive to the animals. We may not think that just a walk through a sagebrush meadow is a big deal, but apparently it is a very sensitive issue in winter range and fragments the habitat and how the use of that property by the animals. Also, just the presence of dogs in many cases excites the animals, and calories are lost in the winter when they're really trying to survive, and stress levels from pedestrian movement are actually higher on the animals in some cases than, say, motorized use, where the animals get a little bit more used to the noise from the motorized uses. So that's a little bit of what we've learned. And we've learned also that even in lower winter years, low snowpack years, that the animals still utilize that forage for what they need in terms of the nutrients that they need for the winter to make it through the winter season.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, George?
Just a couple of comments. I think, especially because of the article in the paper, I think it generated a lot of people who were upset by that article because they were caught off guard that there was even discussions on some of these parcels. Although we've had several work sessions, been open to the public. We specifically had an open session Mid-Valley to specifically look at parcels in the Mid-Valley and to ask for input. But I think it was still caught people off guard who missed that. And I think that the key takeaway that what we're trying to encourage in our comments to the BLM is to allow us to take ownership and responsibility in working with the BLM and other entities to develop management plans for each of these unique parcels, be it the Crown, Light Hill, Albany Kittle, whatever. And that's an opportunity that will include full participation by all neighbors, by all interested parties. It's very similar to what our Open Space and Trails Department does. When they purchase a parcel, they go through a thorough public vetting process, getting input before they finalize a management plan. And I think this is what our goal is in terms of our recommendations to the BLM, is to allow us to include the community involvement in seeing how they want to see each unique parcel managed. And I would say that as part of that, as we look at recommendations from the DOW, that we actually would also include studies perhaps by wildlife biologists, by ecologists, similar to, again, what we do when we do a full wildlife management study, whether it be on Sky Ridge property or what we did with the Holy Meadows. And so we get the most accurate information. Everyone really understands exactly the scope of the use of those properties. So I just want the public to understand that what we're doing is we're encouraging the BLM to allow us as a county to take the responsibility and let us, with the citizens, develop management plans for each of these properties and look at all the mixed uses that are currently having up there for long-term management.
Any other questions for staff from the board? Rachel?
Yeah, perhaps this is understood to be part of a management plan anyhow, but it seems to me that there should really be some more of an assertive signage program to explain to the public these winter sensitivities. You know, and I know you get too much stuff on the sign and no one reads any of it. But on the other hand, you know, if you just see an open gate and you're walking through, you know, you don't necessarily think, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't cut through those bushes here because I want to take a viewplane picture somewhere else. Or it's the classic stay on the trails, but why stay on the trails? Or why keep your dog on a leash? Or why to give this, you know, why is it being managed in this way? So again, maybe that's part of what comes out of an active management plan, but at the very least, there should start to be some sort of outreach to the public about what these management programs are for, or these management restrictions are for, or something like that. You know, I think people are a lot more likely to obey a rule when they understand the benefits of it to their other values. Thank you.
I think one of the things that we tried to express in the almost final draft is that we hope that it would be a collaborative process, and that through that process, everyone has an opportunity to learn about the other multiple uses involved, and wildlife being one of those, that everyone would learn a little bit more about what we are trying to preserve from a natural resource perspective, learn a little bit more maybe about what the needs of a mountain biker versus a hiker versus a jeeper might be. So I think that process is always a good educational process.
Yes, sir.
Ellen, I'd emailed you asking a question about the Salt Parks, Open Space and Trails recommendations. Did we get written recommendations for them? One of these notes say that.
I'm sorry, I don't remember seeing.
I don't remember your email, but we did get recommendations.
Well, I would have sent it to Ellen, but...
Okay.
Yeah, but let's see, we definitely worked with the town of Basalt and a representative of the Mid-Valley Trails Planning Committee was there, part of the meeting, and he was representing them and did make some specific comments. And yeah, to the extent that we could, that there was agreement, we did incorporate their...
Yeah, because I'm speaking specifically to the numerous communications we got, questioning, challenging, and putting down our decision. Well, the way the paper reports one thing, now, okay, good heads up, we got some feedback that we need to clarify. So you're saying that we will actually be more articulate in these two sessions relative to Albany, Kittle, and Light Hill.
More specific, yeah.
Yeah, because I absolutely agree with the closures. But it appears, having read further, and your very good email that you sent, Cindy, it explains that really we're talking about, say, a portion of the road to the top of Light Hill, and that's where the close. So those are the kind of, yeah, okay, good. I mean, those clarifications are necessary. Though I'll have to say, from a individual commissioner's perspective, that's me, I don't necessarily think that neighbors to public lands can look at those public lands as their personal playgrounds. So if, and we have certainly said we'd like to see this further process, but that's an unknown. So going forward, if there is not that further process or that doesn't evolve for a year, who knows, we should live with our comments, which is the clarified ones are right on. But I am a little upset that people would try to pull political strings and opposing commissioners, for re-election. And hey, first of all, get educated. I think that really helps, and we did our best without having a series of meetings in Mid-Valley. And now it's been reinforced that there were representatives there. So, some of the lacking certainly could be we need to be a little more articulate. I mean, the book that you already wrote was pretty commendable. So we'll further that. But I stand by my guns about what people's expectations are in their own neighborhoods about public lands. I mean, we've seen this before too. So.
Ellen?
In response to that, Jack, thanks. We did make a clarification. We were trying to be very specific about where winter closures were recommended. But in addition to a response that we got from the SALT, there was some concern that initially we said that there should be no new trails on the Crown in particular. And we went further to specify in this draft that no new trails were appropriate outside of a collaborative effort and management planning process. So we tried to be a little bit more specific, and that was one of at the request of.
Right, and we're sticking to our guns about bandit trails, so we don't support bandit trails because these are like a web.
Right.
Everywhere that you go.
So.
Yes, Cindy? And then George?
Okay, just really quickly, I think that because this plan, the existing plan for the BLM is over 20 years old, I think it took a lot of people by surprise, and I don't blame people for now just waking up to the issue, if you will, and how significant these BLM parcels are in our county. I mean, it's when you really stop, and I appreciate the opportunity that we've had the chance to do that, but when you look at these parcels, just how significant they are to us. And so I think people, if they could have a chance to get into the issues a little bit more, will understand what we're asking and hopefully get more involved in that next step if the BLM accepts our recommendations.
Yeah, and I think those two things, those next steps would certainly include presentations and participation by the neighboring caucuses, the Snowmass Cap Caucus, the Emmett Caucus, Crimson River Valley Caucus, to really get them involved as well. But in terms of the timing, comments now are due today, so they go into the regional BLM office, and then what's the process thereafter?
My understanding is that on February 22nd, the cooperative agencies are invited to come to a meeting where there'll be somewhat of a debrief about all of the comments that have come in. And I'm not 100% positive, but from what I took from the last email, we will then have an opportunity as well to express our comments to the group to see if anyone is supportive or not supportive of what we've said from a regional perspective about the whole plan. And so that's as far as I know.
So that's an opportunity for us to, again, continue to lobby to allow us to develop our own sub-management plans for each of these unique areas. But then what I understand is then the whole docket goes to D.C. And in D.C., I don't know how long that process takes for them to review it, and they actually have to not endorse it, they actually have to put their stamp of approval on it, then it goes back to the regional office. There's a transition there.
There's a transition there that I think also includes the Denver office. as part of that step to DC and back. So I think we'll learn more about that and try to let you know what's going on so that you as elected officials can play your role in trying to influence that.
Yeah, because, along with the controversy in terms of access to BLM trails, of course, a large part of our comments have also taken into account restricting oil and gas development on BLM lands, which is critically important. And so our opportunity to continue to address that as it goes to DC and back, I think we really need to follow up, and it gives Rachel an opportunity when she's in DC this spring to follow up with that as well.
Ultimately, as you know, there will be a final environmental impact statement and draft resource management plan put together, developed. And I don't know if a timeline has been set yet for publication of that final, but that will be another opportunity for public comment as part of the NEPA process.
Yes, Rachel?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it will probably kind of go subsurface for a while when we don't hear much of anything, especially if they take to heart our comments, and which came from other boards, to say there should be a new hybrid alternative F or E or whatever we want to see, because we had suggested parts of B we liked, parts of C we liked, and wanted to see C go further even in conservation goals. And so for them to potentially draft a new alternative and do the answering to that is different. That takes a little longer course than as if they, kind of, and they need to answer each of the questions that were raised or comments from each of the participants. So that's another part of the NEPA process, is to answer the questions and concerns that are raised. So it may be quite a while that we hear anything back other than this initial debrief.
Yes, Jim.
Yeah, I'd like to clarify and make sure I'm not caught in semantics. George, you said, talking about this hybrid process, you used the term "our." Well, it's in conjunction with the BLM you're talking about. No, really, it would be a subset of their resource management plan. That's
right.
Yeah, because I'm a little uncomfortable if we're saying we're going to create a plan on public lands, number one, but more importantly, the whole process and its validity at the end of the day.
Yeah, you're correct. It's our wish to get the BLM to buy into that process, to allow us to develop with the BLM other interested parties sub-area management plans. But they have to be the ones to ultimately buy into that.
And that was supported by other jurisdictions too, right? That idea?
At least by BOCC.
Yeah,
Yes.
good.
And we've got the Eagle County comments today, but I haven't had a chance to read them. So,
Thank you.
Yes, Rachel.
Did you find out that the city of Aspen made comments on the air quality airshed issues?
I talked with them about that, and it was during Lee's transition and retirement, and the only comment that I got back was that, in fact, they read our comments and felt that they were good comments. However, felt that if we as a county or as a city were going to be doing any monitoring and help with this adaptive environmental approach, that we would need to staff up for that from an expertise perspective. That's the only comment that I received.
Thank you.
So, thank you for your work, I appreciate it. And you're going to mail it this afternoon?
Well, we can, I don't know how much time you've set aside. We can do this in one of two ways. I can email it to everybody if you'd like. Oh, are we going to email the final comments this afternoon?
To the
I'll
people.
go to the post office and...
Oh, yes, we will be emailing it this afternoon. What I was going to say was that I do have a draft with the major changes highlighted. I'm happy to walk through those with you if you'd like. If not, let sleeping dogs lie.
Are you
We'll
going to
go
put the
ahead.
draft on the webpage?
Yes, we will.
So that will be up today or tomorrow or something?
I don't know how long it'll take to get it posted. We'll get it to the right person this afternoon. I can't
So one of the reasons that this is being done at what seems like the last minute is that we've taken an inordinate amount of time to discuss this. How many meetings do you think we've had on this subject?
We, in this room, there have been 4 occasions to discuss the issue. One at length with your work session, several other meetings, and then the Down Valley meeting that George talked about that I think was December the 8th, where we met in the El Jabal Community Center. And that meeting lasted, I think, at least 3 hours, where we went over all of the maps and went over all of the...
Panic alarm from here? Is everybody okay? Okay.
Rob, did your knee hit the panic button?
Is that somewhere?
Yeah, I think my knee hit that.
You're okay? Kind of like, what is this under here? Just making sure, so.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about it.
Thank you.
I thought it was like part of a table adjustment. I'm like, what is this under
So
here?
There's a panic button under that center table.
I'm not panicking yet on this.
Good to know that's there.
It's been there
So
for-
they're over there now?
It's part of the security that they have.
I'm not going to panic.
They just don't have the door locked behind them.
Switching seats
I'm
here.
sorry for the interruption. So we've had 5 meetings total,
Right.
and over the course of how many months?
We began this discussion, I believe, in a November work session, late November work session.
And so the result of that is this draft appearing what seems like at the last minute, but it's because we've had so much consideration of all the variations and permutations of this plan. And so I think staff has made a concerted effort to have a thorough analysis of this, and I deeply appreciate it, and I think the citizens deeply appreciate it, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, in addition, Michael, and it's good to kind of, review the amount of work we've done in this room, but Dorothea and Cindy and George and Cindy also, over a period of several years, have been involved in this process too, kind of nurturing it, reporting to us, and all that stuff. So this is one heck of a body of work that's gone into it. And again, staff, thank you.
And in addition, for the record, just Cindy and I did meet with other agencies and jurisdictions in up and down the valley to coordinate efforts. So, yeah, there's been a lot going on to pull this together.
Right, and not just the jurisdictions, but some of the special interest groups.
And agencies.
And agencies. So, yeah, you had requested that we do that after, I think, our Down Valley meeting in December to further follow up with the regional approach. And so there has been a lot. We did send out notification to the caucus groups and in the newspaper about our meeting Mid-Valley, but it's understandable. I mean, there's just so much information that hopefully we'll get a chance to really specifically look at these parcels as a community.
Michael, another quick, I'd appreciate it, and maybe others on the board, of course, would appreciate notification whenever this debrief happens, the date and location. Like, given that we're not at another meeting, we might go.
Well, at this point, it's, that meeting is set for the cooperative agency representatives. I'm sure if the elected officials wanted to come, they could, but they're trying to maintain that as that same group of cooperative agency individuals, and it is February 22nd, and as far as I know, it's in Silt at the BLM office.
And that's a Wednesday regular meeting date.
Oh, BLM?
Pure Flow Management is in Silt off of
okay.
a frontage road.
It's a regular
I'm
meeting.
good, I'm going to our regular meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, staff.
Thank you.
So, is there a further open discussion, John?
I've got a couple more items for you, just to check in with the board. We have now interviewed 5 applicants for the Agriculture Building Review Committee. There are 5 seats on that board. To my knowledge, we do not have new applicants at this time, but we are continuing to advertise, and we have contacted all of the caucuses. I don't know if the board is prepared to discuss appointments. I can review the names, or if you wanted to, again, have some additional applicants to increase that pool to choose from for your initial appointments.
George?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with selecting a few out of this candidate pot that we have. And we may not come up with 5 for right now, but for me, I think we'll have enough qualified people to get this committee off and running, and then we can always add as applications come in. So I'm comfortable with making recommendations today.
Rachel?
You know, I was, I think it's City Market in Elginville a week ago, maybe 10 days ago, and an individual came up to me and asked about it and said they were interested, and I told them be sure to look online and get your name in quickly if you want to, because we're getting close. Apparently that hasn't happened, if we haven't, because Rio was not that person. And I feel we're probably pretty close. I'd like to do kind of a, maybe if we heightened it, that it's a final call for applicants for this board or something, and then get those names and think about them at home rather than try to do it off the cuff now, because I've left my other applicants' forms at home.
Okay.
But I think George is right. It's about time to start rounding that up.
So maybe at the next work session we can have a list of those applicants, and we can make because we could appoint 3, constitute a board, and then wait for more applicants or make decisions later. But I think it is important to constitute this board in a timely manner. So if you'll get that set up for the next work session.
Yeah, Michael, Johnny might consider providing us, other than today's, which we have, some of those other previous applications, because it's been almost 2 months maybe since the first one.
Sure. And we're happy to do that. We'll put a packet of information together for you. I just wanted to seek direction on how you wanted to proceed with that at this point. The second item that I want to talk about is, and this has been a little bit ago now, the board provided direction to change our process for appointing members to the BOCC Library Board. And a little bit after that, we said there may be some concerns with the statutory scheme, and we've learned a lot about how library boards are appointed since then. In essence, we have 2 choices as a county for how library board members are appointed to districts that were created in by multiple jurisdictions. One way is what we've been doing, which is to delegate that appointment, the interview and appointment process, to the Board of Trustees of the district, with a ratification of 2/3 or more of our board members here. And that's the process that we've been following. The other way is for the jurisdictions that created the district. And so in that case, I believe it's Pitkin County, Basalt, and Eagle County, to create an appointment committee with 2 members from each body. So the Board of County Commissioners would appoint 2 representatives, Eagle County would appoint 2 representatives, Basalt would appoint 2 representatives, and then that acts as an appointing body for the library district. We actually do not have the ability, as we had originally thought, to go ahead and advertise and make our own appointments like we do through our regular process. And so I wanted to bring that back to you to see if you wanted to pursue this other alternative, in lieu of being able to go through our standard appointment process. If you would want us to try and work with the other jurisdictions to create an appointing, what is in essence an appointing committee. Right now, the Basalt Library District does have 3 vacancies coming up. They are currently advertising for those vacancies, and their intent is to send those to us for ratification. My understanding, Basalt was pursuing a similar strategy to ours, that they were looking to do their own advertising and appointing, and that Eagle County was interested in just doing what they've always done, which is the ratification process. I haven't had a discussion yet with Basalt or Eagle County about, would there be any traction for creating this appointing committee, because I wanted to bring this back to you first and see if there was any preference from this board in terms of how we make those appointments.
Rich?
Yeah, just a question. If Eagle, Pitkin, and Basalt were participating in creating an appointment board, do they have to appoint from their elected body, or can they appoint citizens?
My understanding is they could, participating governmental unit shall appoint 2 of its members to a committee. So I'd read that
As the board?
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I can see where Eagle County might be a little hesitant, given the travel commitments to get over to this valley for interviews and how difficult it can be to schedule interviews. I mean, even when we're trying our best, we only have 1 a day, or 1 this week, and 1 2 weeks from now, and things like that. So not to say that shouldn't be something to be pursued, but I can see why they're taking that kind of course of least resistance. And I was wondering if it was something that they had to be commissioners, or they could appoint someone else. Because otherwise, you'd want to try to sync up some of the scheduling so that perhaps when we have our annual meeting with them, they're doing library board interviews in the morning, or when they're over here for, which they do periodically, for planning and zoning matters as well, trying to sync those things up together. Challenge.
So, under the process of the board sending forth nominations or making nominations, and then we ratify, we can still interview those particular candidates, right?
Yeah, there's nothing that prohibits us from bringing those candidates up.
So if we interview a candidate and find that they're not, in our opinion, worthy of ratification, we don't have to ratify. So it's a fairly powerful position nonetheless, right?
I think you could view it that way, yeah.
Yeah. George?
I would like us to pursue an appointing committee. Even though Eagle County is a little far removed by distance, we're also far removed by understanding the needs of the Basalt Regional Library District. And so for them to be able to participate with Basalt and with us, I think would enable everyone to have a better understanding of the needs of the library, the responsibilities and the role of the boards, and in the end, have better board members selected versus just ratifying without having the opportunity for us to interview Eagle County positions or vice versa. So I think it's a much more open, transparent process. And I think it allows for better accountability for board members to their constituents. And I believe Basalt would buy into this process, and I'm hoping that between us and Basalt that we can convince the Eagle County Commissioners of the importance of participating in this versus just ratification.
How does the board feel about that, Jack?
John, does this mean that it would be, in this committee, 2 individuals from each jurisdiction, so it'd be 6?
That's how it's laid out. Yeah,
And that's state law?
that's state law.
It'd be nice if it was just 1 from each, because then it might be easier to schedule, but I agree with George, because I just do not like and really never have been enthusiastic about a board that's seeking members being a final determination on, who sits on their board per the other process. And though Michael's right about an interview, and if we can give our feedback, at the end of the day, they don't have to accept it.
No, that's not true, Jack. We have powers of ratification. So if we decide that we're not going to ratify a board member, they don't get on.
So you almost have a veto in that case of the recommendation of the board. What we don't have is the ability to go out and proactively seek and appoint applicants from the commissioner's perspective.
So we have a veto, but we don't have necessarily
We don't
a
get-
yay that's going to stick
Well,
necessarily.
we don't get to see the full pool of applicants either. We only get to see the ones that have been forwarded to us.
Yes.
One, just to be clear, we've got a veto power, but it's also a small minority veto power, because really if two of the board don't like an applicant, because you said we have to ratify it by two-thirds.
That's correct.
So it's really only if two of the boards don't like, two of the five don't like the person, they could veto that person. Four of the people have to ratify.
Yes.
Or in the case if one person's not here, 3 out of 4.
Right, and typically I think they're envisioning, for commissioners, a 3-person board, which is the statutory scheme.
Yeah.
And so that math worked out a little more clean.
And is there anything in the state statute that prohibits us from taking an active role in seeking candidates? To getting candidates to apply and reach out to the board?
As long as they are applying to the, so under the first scheme, where we're ratifying the selection for of the library district board, I don't think there'd be anything wrong with us soliciting folks to apply, but they would not be applying with us, they'd be applying with the library district. And I think that's the difference that in the direction that the board was hoping to go, that I understood. But no, Rob, I don't think there's anything that prohibit us if we wanted to help advertise, for folks to apply to the library district for appointment in that case.
My preference is to stick with the way things are, but take a more active role and let the library board know that we're going to take a more active role in interviewing the candidates as they go through the ratification process.
Well, we have interviewed.
Yeah.
And so that's been a change that we've made that I think is within our ability, but that would be the status quo then.
But let me clarify. We don't interview all the candidates for the library board. We interview representatives from Pickens County. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's just those from Pickens County, and it is just the ones that have been forwarded by the library district. Now, what we did not see in the statutory scheme is our practice of, basically right now what we do is, we look at the ones from Pickens County, Eagle County looks at Eagle County, and Basalt looks at Basalt, and then we tend to, if Eagle County is ratified, we tend to go ahead and ratify those appointments. So we're meeting the statutory scheme, but if we wanted to, you guys could ask to interview the representatives from Eagle County and Basalt also before you ratify. And that is a business practice, really, that we've adopted to ratify the candidate or the appointees from Eagle County that have been ratified by the Eagle County Board. They have to be ratified by all the jurisdictions.
So maybe Eagle County would participate in the committee if we met over in Eagle County. Maybe that would help.
That's possible.
Yeah, I mean, we have such a hard time, even when we try to do a joint appointment between the city and us with the housing, and interviewing and getting together and trying to decide. And if one entity doesn't agree, then we have to go back to the drawing board. So to try to ratify between 3 different entities and get the best qualified person that we can for the people of the Salt Regional Library District, I think we're doing a disservice to those people unless we can all work together collaboratively with an appointing committee, so everyone gets to see, review, and interview applicants for each of the district. But for me, otherwise, we're going to run into, I think, some problems in terms of who's going to ratify, and we have to start interviewing applicants from Eagle County or Basalt, and we have a problem with them, and they have to go back to the drawing board, and in the end, we may never get appointees made.
Just Rachel.
Yeah, I would have that fear about the timeliness. Anytime a board is down to minimal members or can't make a quorum because someone's sick and they were down to minimal members, that's a disservice to the public. What I'm wondering is on the second scheme, the appointment committee, 2 members from each jurisdiction that are contributing to the tax base. Is it kind of vague, or does it say that all 6 must be there to be a quorum? Or is it set up kind of to mean 1 primary and kind of 1 alternate, or 2 people in between the 2 of them they cover, and as long as you have 1 from Eagle, 1 Basalt, 1 Picken County, then it would be a quorum for this appointment board? Because that to me works okay. If you're trying to get 6 people's schedules together, it would be a real challenge, and I could see it being a delayed process there as well. I'm okay with it. I mean, I'd like to support the direction you're going in. I think given the significant tax base within Picken County that supports those operations and those expectations of those citizens to be well represented, it makes more sense to be interviewing and having discussions with the expectations of the appointing boards representing from their larger board for the performance of the library. So I agree with that. I just think in terms of how workable it is, it'd be nice if it was as long as there's 3 people, it's a quorum, 1 from each jurisdiction. We not truly alternates because they're equal partners, but we make sure it's covered. I would, obviously just put out there the point that's the rest of the 3 of us who are not on that appointing board are kind of delegating our responsibility and our insight to the 2 members who are. And I'm okay with that. But that's, if it gets down to 1 person, then the 4 of us are entrusting that 1 person to make the right calls.
And I do not know what the quorum requirements are for that appointing committee.
There's also a resolution of a deadlock, so you could have a 3-3 vote, and that would be very unfortunate. So, and I'm assuming there's no provisions for that either. So, yes, Rob.
How would we create this new committee? I mean, do all 3 jurisdictions have to approve? So it may be a moot point if Eagle says, well, we want the status quo, or if Basalt says, well, we want the status quo.
You're right. And before I approach the entities, I wanted to have the discussion here to see if that was a direction you guys wanted to go.
So, I mean, my feeling is that the library board itself in Basalt ought to have that kind of home rule, and that it doesn't need to be delegated to the various jurisdictions, because you really want to empower that community, Basalt, to monitor itself. And they were actually successful in doing that with this most current controversy. I mean, it was difficult for them, but they went through it and they survived. And I think by withdrawing that kind of, making a distance between that library board and who appoints to that library board, you're not really serving the needs of the community particularly well. They got themselves in the jam and they worked themselves out of it. The community in Basalt did. So I would be much more supportive of the status quo with a very active ratification process and a real scrutiny of the candidates coming from Picken County. I think that's what works best. But yes, Rachel.
Yeah. Michael, you make a good point with that, and there is a lot for us to consider here. Whatever way the rest of the discussion goes, it seems that perhaps we try to add more structure to our annual meeting with Eagle County and schedule for a longer time period in such a way that we could have a meeting of Basalt, Eagle, and Picken County about library and the library board structured into a day, because you'd already have at least 2 of the 3 entities in the valley for that meeting, unless it's one where we're traveling all the way over to Eagle, which we do sometimes too. But it just seems that it's not so much the appointment, it's maybe as much as the touching base and keeping on track throughout the year. Sometimes to do one appointment and then say off on your own may not be as valuable as keeping in communications throughout a year. So maybe that's a different way to strengthen whichever process we're using.
And also to meet with the library board itself. That's still a remove from the library board. So the library board is really I would think, the governing board of the library in Basalt. And if we had a check-in with them or their president even, that would be even better, quite frankly, than meeting with Eagle County.
Well, the reason I suggest it is because it is their role as well, and it's Eagle County taxpayers as well supporting the library, and that, I wouldn't want the library board to end up getting 3 different messages. Well, the Pickens County Commissioner said we should go in this direction, the Eagle County Commissioner said we should go in this direction, and the Basalt Town Council, representing their taxpayers, comes up with a 3rd direction. That's the only reason I was suggesting that it, would work well as a joint meeting. But.
Yeah, I'll repeat my support for the appointment board 2, and 2. I think it really is time, and obviously we're all aware of the current discomfort down there. We'll just put that in quotes and leave it at that. This would be keeping with our approach to regionalism and collaboration, and I think moving forward, there is going to be a need for some working together, and this is an ideal forum. Now, if this doesn't work, that's one thing, but we've been asked to, a little research has given us 2 choices, and I'm supportive, and I'll volunteer as one of those, since part of my district is in the Basalt Library District.
So, should we resolve the question now amongst the board?
Yeah, because I'm actually not quite clear where the board's at on this.
I think it's slightly split, but George?
Yeah, I'm supportive of at least seeing whether there's an interest of Eagle County to participate in the appointing committee and see if it's a possibility that there's a minimum quorum that's required, as Rachel suggested. I think one of the main issues or concerns that came out of the small group of citizens that were very vocal with the library board was around its accountability and the process that has been used in the past in terms of ratification. And last year was the first year, I think, that we actually did do interviews, which was a great step. But we didn't. But I think the community is looking for that accountability, and that accountability, since the library board district members are not elected, that accountability falls back to those who actually appoint them, and that would be the elected officials. So because of that, I think we have a very important role in this, and I think Basalt understands it as well, because they're close to the issue, and again, because of Eagle County's their distance, they may not be as close to the heart of the issue as we are in this valley, and so hopefully they would consider that and see if it's going to be manageable and workable first. If it's not manageable and workable, then we have that option to interview all candidates and have the opportunity to vote up or down on them.
Well, I think we only interview Pickens County candidates.
Well, we would have the opportunity to ratify other district candidates, and to ratify them either yes or no, I would think we'd want to have the opportunity to interview them.
That is true, that, we right now, we do adopt resolutions ratifying the Eagle County selections as well as Basalt selections. What we have not done is interview. We only have interviewed folks who are appointed from within unincorporated Pickens County.
So, Rob, what's your feeling?
I guess my feeling is to feel out the other 2 districts and find out what direction they're going. And I think there are benefits and disadvantages to both, and I don't have a clear direction on one that I'm in favor of.
Rachel?
I'll go with the appointment board and investigating that and see how far along we can get with that.
So really what it hinges on, the direction is to talk to Eagle County and see where they're headed. If they're not sympathetic to forming a board, then the question is over with. So.
But I think they should be clear to them that, at least what I would suggest is that we then have the opportunity to interview those candidates that they may be putting on the slate, and we may approve or disapprove.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting if you're voting to ratify their forwarded name, you should at least be able to interview the person you're being asked to ratify. You know, you're not interviewing the whole pool of applicants, but at least the person, rather than rubber stamp. I don't know that that's prohibited somewhere, that you have to ratify or not ratify without actually speaking with the individual. And just kind of a further thought from me for your investigation, and you were probably planning on it anyhow, but to offer them a couple of schemes of how we see that it could work fairly easily given the distance. How we'd like to, so it's not just a big demand or request without some alternatives of how it could take place in practice.
Okay, John?
Yeah, sorry to flog this horse, but I want to make sure, John, that your direction is our first choice by a majority of opinion is to go ahead and have the appointment board set up. Because then I heard, you say that and then you give 9 other alternatives, well, then you're not hammering home where our preference
No.
is.
I'm just saying how the appointment board itself could work.
Separate of that.
Yeah, that was one alternative board, and these are some of the ways we think it could work given the travel distances.
So, Michael, why don't I go ahead and clarify what we've heard, and that way maybe...
Tell us what you're going to tell the jurisdiction.
Well, I might want to think about that a little bit more, but right now the direction is to contact the other jurisdictions to see if there's interest in setting up the appointment board. I think the advantage of that is it obviously gives us more opportunity as one of the participating entities to both identify and select, be proactive in identifying and selecting candidates. And that's our first preference. If any one of our reading of this, and I have to tell you, the state statute is very complicated on this. It seems to be able to go a few different directions, to be honest with you. This is where it comes down on the interpretation. And so if any one of those entities does not wish to do that, then we understand we're back to ratification and we'll be more aggressive and potentially more aggressive in how we use that ratification to be sure that we're getting the best candidates for the library district board. That's my understanding at this point.
Under that other scenario, would individual jurisdictions advertise for the members? I think I heard that. We couldn't advertise for Eagle County and wouldn't want to, right? Yeah.
We could advertise that there's an opening and here's where to apply the Eagle County address.
Sure, Pat's pretty tight on.
There's nothing in that we can identify in the statute that says 2 have to come from Basalt, 2 have to come from Eagle, 2 have... As far as Board of Trustees, they just have to reside within the boundary. And so I still need to do some research because I don't know the history of how we got to, so many appointees to the library board coming from Basalt. It could be in a IGA, it could be in the forming documents of the district, but it's certainly not required by statute.
Any further discussion on this matter? Okay, John, report back to us when you find out.
Thank you.
Those were my open discussion items for you.
Any open discussion on the part of the board? Seeing none, we have, do you want to go ahead and prep for the joint meeting with the city? Are we expecting any guests from the city at 2:30?
Not at this point. We did talked to staff from the city, and they had actually suggested 2 items for the agenda. And so what we're doing is we have a joint meeting coming up with the City of Aspen on February 7th, and this is our opportunity to talk about potential agenda items for that joint meeting. As staff, we propose talking about the Child Care Assistance Program to update the council on the changes that you have directed, as well as our understanding of what that means for the interaction with Kids First, to continue really that dialogue that was started last year when we met. I believe that last meeting was our joint budget meeting. The city has requested that we also provide a little bit of time to give an update on the Pro Cycle Challenge and how that process is moving forward. And also, they have a proposal for affordable housing, energy efficiency programming changes. They want to look at opportunities to improve the energy efficiency within the affordable housing as transactions occur. And so they want to visit with us a little bit about that and get our feedback on it. Wasn't sure if there's some other topics.
I mean, let me just begin by saying, it seems to me that this is kind of an uninspiring kind of agenda, given that we're actually physically meeting with the city council, that these subjects could be handled in a memo and be done with. I mean, I don't see that it's imperative to actually, the nature of us being there with them, what would we talk about? You could just do this in the agenda, in a packet form, and it'd be over with. So are we really using our time? That's my question. Are we really using our time with the Aspen City Council effectively to further our relationship with the City Council? I mean, that's what I would like to see. And what subject is that? And I'm not sure what it is, but I'm pretty sure it's not here.
Well, and I think that's a fantastic question, and if that's something that we can talk about a little bit and identify maybe what some other key issues out there that we need to start a dialogue or have a dialogue board to board on. That's actually why we bring these to you. And you're right, staffs may be a little bureaucratic in nature, given that these are the issues that we're dealing with back and forth, but it may not be the significant issues that you as policymakers want.
There has been discussion about improving relationships with the City of Aspen or with all our jurisdictions, and if we're going to meet face-to-face, is there an opportunity face-to-face to improve that relationship or not? Or do we lay the groundwork for, these are some of the impediments to a good relationship that we see, and can we talk about it with you in a way that's helpful? I don't know. Yes, George.
I guess for me, when I look at this list, and I understand what Michael is saying, for me, it would be a question, let's say if we take Child Care Assistance Program, is there an opportunity for us to see about other future funding opportunities, either from the city, county, Kids First? I mean, where are we going to go in terms of long-term on this issue? So that may be one expansion of that. Same with the Pro Cycle Challenge update. Are we expecting the city to ask us for additional support, either manpower or fiscally? If not, then it is just really an update. As long as we're not going to get blindsided at the last minute by request for approval by us, and we haven't really had an opportunity to discuss whatever that may be. If it's for example, running a race up and down from the Maroon Bells. I mean, that's sort of an issue that I think would need to be discussed and couldn't be addressed just in a memo. The other thing that I think we had talked about a while ago in terms of a need to get together with City Council was a discussion of the whole organization of APSHA and its roles and responsibilities. That's really a big policy issue in terms of where it's been and where it's going, and there's a lot of different avenues for discussion on that we may be able to put together if it's appropriate. And that may tie in a little bit with their housing energy efficiency project proposal, but how does APSHA really fit into this whole discussion? Every time we deal with affordable housing issues, we make appointments, and where are the responsibilities start and end, with not only with APSHA, but with the city and with the county elected officials?
But, the problem is to get the discussion going, George. That's always been our problem with the city council, is that we don't really ever have a discussion that they're prepared to do because of whatever preparation they have or don't have. So I'm not sure how we do it. I just haven't been to a good joint meeting. Yes, Rachel?
I guess I don't rate all the meetings I go to on good, bad, or excellent, or in between. I think I've participated in some good meetings with the city council about topics of interest, and this is a meeting that for us to bring, or our staff to bring, potential bullet points as well. I mean, John has just presented these are what the city has said, but it's wide open for us to look for topics as well. And, I think there's probably, I don't want the, razzle-dazzle of how great Pro-Cycle Challenge is, but more about what is the planning, what is the integration, what is the coordination on it this year. It's going to be better. I think that maybe it's similar to what George was saying, but, and it's similar to what you're saying too, Michael, is maybe to begin a discussion about, how do we, or at what level do we integrate our future affordable housing program efforts. We have a portfolio tool, we're going into a retreat. This is going to be happening, I think the meeting is going to be after our retreat.
Yeah.
And so they may want to ask for a little debrief of the goals as reported in the newspaper, things like that. We have an opportunity to bring those forward. I'm curious about what is the thinking going on with the Aspen Area Community Plan update, where our P&Z has adopted, the City Council has not yet ratified, and is considering ratifying or considering tweaking. And I know the one item I really felt very strongly about and brought forward repeatedly was that the new Aspen Area Community Plan just defines affordable housing as employee housing and employee housing everywhere. And it used to always be affordable housing. And I think even the ballot languages that were passed by the voters to fund it were affordable housing, not employee housing. I think there's a connotation there that don't necessarily need to make room for children and families, or don't need to make room for seniors, or have seniors retire in that. And I'd like to have some input into their dialogue if they're looking at tweaking the plan and in what areas and why. I don't know that needs to be the major issue. It's just our interface with the urban interface, but there are proposals and discussions again about growth. I mean, if we were starting to have a discussion that said, how do we jointly implement the Aspen Area Community Plan, or what is our staff seeing as some of the major challenges, or how do we work better together would be a great theme for every single one of our joint meetings. But how do we work together with the city better, in my mind, about some of the broader environmental issues that Pickens County has. And it just seems to me in the past the city was taking a little more of an active role on some of those matters, but the the flight training, the low altitude flight training over Pickens County, we've made comments, we've been strong about it. How involved is the city? Does the city have any concerns? Can they go further? Or even, as I had asked Cindy to talk to them about the airshed issues that will affect their air quality of the skiers on Aspen Mountain and on Highlands. But are they commenting on that section of the BLM plan? No, and why not? And so I think if we have a topic of how do we work together better for broader community goals, and then these are all kind of small subsets of that in areas where we intersect, that's fine. But so that's kind of how I see it. But I really would like to know more about the AACP, what those tweaks are, and does that mean it has to come back to our P&Z to ratify it? And it just feels a little out of the loop after 2 years of participating in it. But the role of APSHA in the future and how our two different affordable programs mesh for the biggest bang for the buck is certainly of concern to me.
So what I hear you saying, Rachel, is, I mean, the sort of, the overall thing is how do we work, I mean, and I like this topic, how do we work together for strengthen community goals, and joint community goals? That's actually a topic of discussion. That gets rid of staff making a presentation, their staff making a presentation to us, our staff making a and you walk out going, well, what was that about? So, because there's no discussion. We never talk about anything there. We just get presentations, and they get a presentation. So I like the idea of how, of posing the question is, how do we jointly work together to further community goals?
And similar to, we're going to have just done our retreat, and hopefully we'll have some priorities that we're going to work on out of that. Similarly, the City Council has done retreat work, and they have a list of goals. I think they term theirs best year yet, and they've got 7 to 10 goals that I don't know if you're aware of at this point. It may be a good way to couch that initial discussion, to share what those priorities are. Because my guess is we're going to have quite a bit of overlap within that. We're going to see some opportunities for those future discussions, and that makes it a more strategic discussion, and it makes it a discussion about what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish, and where there could be synergies between the organizations versus what's the tactical issue of the day, which is the bullet points that you're getting right now.
Yeah, I mean, those are delivered by staff, so, George?
Yeah, along those same lines, which I like the direction we're going in, sort of tangential off of the pro-cycle challenge update, really the discussion centers more about special events and how the city may view special events for their purpose and how we may view special events and perhaps the impacts. And we recently saw, to the chagrin probably of the Snowmass Town Council, the Jeep tour that went off the table this year because they were a little frustrated with the timing of the process of the county's requirements. So what is a philosophical discussion in terms of what really benefits the community as a whole, and where are the obstacles and where are the areas of agreement? So that's sort of a broad-based discussion as well that falls under the common goals for the community.
So does the board sort of go with that? I mean, Ron?
Yeah, I like where this is all going. The way I worded it before you said something was, discussing what our goals are for the year and how they can participate in helping us with our goals, and the same vice versa. Getting somehow a facilitation and conversation on what their goals are for the year and how we might be able to help and assist them in their goals, and creating this discussion of collaboration and how, we need to be working together better and those types of things. Is a good way to start the beginning of the year and saying, this is what we came up with, what we want to accomplish. You may not agree with everything, but what could you help us with, or what would we like your help with in accomplishing those things, and vice versa.
Jack, is that?
Yeah, I like what you opened this part of the agenda with, Michael, about actual discussions instead of rote, presentation, boom, 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 and not, certainly affordable housing, energy efficiency, that issue was on the table when we approved both of our budgets, and it makes sense to figure out where they've evolved to, because we didn't like the idea of, putting monies into specific home ownerships. So maybe there's for improvements. Pro cycle, I think that's got to be real brief because it's pretty early on, and obviously face up that question though. Hey, what do you expect of us, or how can we team up to make it even better? Childcare, I'm pretty exhausted with that item, and really don't have any desire to speak about it, so have at it. But the greater issue is about our relationship, and Yeah, I'm pretty straight up the way I look at it. I would pose the question, can we improve our relationship and how? Just straight up, you know. Yeah, there's some background, there's a little disagreement, maybe, we'll just put that in quotes, disagreement about the hydro project, or at least stream flows, not the hydro project. But, you know, those things inevitably, we can't agree on everything. But it's, well, what's the vision? We have similar value systems, but we operate, I think, quite differently. You know, the way each organization, and our focus. Counties are, and no disrespect here, municipalities, but counties are bigger picture, more regional, more involved, etc. Municipalities are very much self-interested, and you understand that. But does that hold us back from actually having a better communication, line of communication, and sense of ownership in certain issues that we can work together? That's the question I'd be asking.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I can see this conversation, as others have said, going in a good direction. And it seems that there's a separation between, updates, project updates, where there might be a sense of direction that our staffs, collective staffs, are asking for collective direction on. But one of those that does strike me is the Aspen Airport Business Center potential funding opportunities, because of Eagles not being shovel-ready for some of the allocation money. And, you know, I don't even know when the next EOTC is scheduled for, but rather than coming in cold just at the EOTC meeting and trying to gather two groups' support for that funding, you know, talking to the city about it during this meeting and letting them know that, you know, in many ways, and I'm sure they feel this way, the Airport Business Center is an entrance to your town as well. It certainly is the entrance to some of the housing that they've built recently, and this would be a benefit to, you know, to the public. And so that would be something from our side. I think we need to update them on, you know, the meetings and stack stuff, which they're not as intimately involved with anymore. Updating on both city and county goals is a great idea. But so, you know, one is process. How do we support each other's goals better? Understanding each other's goals better, and working relationships. And then the second might be just update on projects or new things, that heads up, you know, heads up on this and update on project. If I was a member from the city, I would want, and I'm sure this is where the Child Care Assistance Program update came from, was they may not fully understand what we did, you know, or what the implication of our last work session as reported in the paper was. What does it mean? And so, you know, I think that they're just, you know, kind of asking, well, where'd you guys go with it? What are you doing with it? What does it mean? You know, as opposed to, you know, we may feel tired because we've discussed it fully, but maybe we haven't fully explained it to our partners and this sort of thing.
Yeah, you know, but I do think the groundwork for that is in a memo from us, saying, here's the actions we took at our meeting, and this is what we're doing. So
Sure,
that should answer your questions.
I don't disagree with you at all.
Much going beyond that, but
If you have further questions than what's in the memo, now you have the background. As you've said before, and I think that's right, these background memos should either present the basis for a dialogue, or they're just an update. If there's further questions, you'd have enough background information pre-reading before the meeting, and now we can have some dialogue about it.
let's use the meeting for the dialogue, rather than having staff say this, and we did 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 this. So, because it just, because you don't really meet each other.
Yeah.
John, does that give direction?
Yeah, I think that gives us good direction.
Yeah, and in terms of when you're talking about affordable housing, employee housing, you know, you might call it balanced community housing, which, in other words, it encompasses all those aspects of retirees, young families, working people, and makes a balanced community. That's really, I think, the goals of the program.
Yeah.
Okay, so any further discussion for the City of Aspen joint meeting?
I think we have plenty to fill the time. Yeah.
So we have a break scheduled at 3 Does anybody want to start taking a break right now?
Yeah, well, why not take a break till 3:15?
That's a great idea, Jack. Let's do that. Let's do that.
Great.
So 3:15, we'll be back.
We got time for dinner.
Yeah. Well, now, are we having a P and Z meeting at 5?
Yes.
There is a P and Z meeting at 5, to my knowledge. I have not heard back from Cindy that I got.
Because I'm going to ask that we wrap up our meeting with time to leave this meeting, so it's an empty room at 5 o'clock, not that we leave at 5.
That we adjourn, yeah. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Wrong break.
We're here as the BOCC of Beacon County, January 17th work session. It's about 3:15 in the afternoon. On our agenda at this time is medical marijuana licensing. And we have a memo from John Ely that he'll go over. First of all, I just want to outline sort of what our plan is for today. We're going to end this discussion a little before 5 o'clock, so the room can be totally vacated. At 5, we have the P&Z coming. And I'll just outline what a work session is. Typically, we get mundane stuff done for the county at a work session, or investigate matters, or discuss matters. And at this particular time in the work session, we're going to explore the issue of medical marijuana licensing. We're not going to take any official action at this work session. It's simply going to be a form of investigation, discussion, and I will allow time for members of the public, seeing that there are many members of the public here, to ask questions and to bring up issues, or to give a short presentation of what they feel their issue is. So there'll be time to do that. But as I said, we're going to be quitting a little before 5. So we have almost 2 hours to talk about this. So that's the format. No official action will be taken. We might give direction to staff to further investigate a subject or to actually draw up a resolution for a later date. So That's the format of today. John Ely, our county attorney, has prepared a memo for us, and he'll introduce that memo to us and to the public. So, John, take it away. John, I also want to, why would you put on a sports coat for this particular section?
You know, I don't know. The spirit moved me, I guess.
Okay.
That and the fact I was somewhere else before I got it. All right, thank you, Michael. The issue, as Michael's explained to the public and the board also, is here and on the board's agenda for discussion and any direction that the board would like to give staff, which is to say, give me. Previously, the board discussed the issue of marijuana licensing through the Medical Marijuana Act. And earlier, when this item was discussed, around August, I believe it was, in 2011, the board declined to take any action. At that time, the action was keyed up before the board in the form of a land use code amendment. I'm not sure exactly how that got to that position, but the driver that has initiated this particular scheduling and the discussion that we'll have is that the county was informed particularly by the state through two officers who are both present here today that the county's absence of an action in granting a local license would not allow the state to go forward and grant a state license. And so our failure to consider an active role in the licensing process was going to end up by being a de facto denial of licensing requests at the state level. Because the last time we talked about this, I know that that was not on anybody's mind, so if we are going to precipitate that effect, it's better to do so knowingly, and if we do not want to see that result, then the direction would be to myself to generate an ordinance that would establish a local countywide licensing program for medical marijuana distributing, infusion, if you will, and manufacturing of marijuana-infused products, as well as grow sites and grow operations. That's about it.
Okay. John, let me ask you a question. The question of interpretation of whether action or no action results in a denial, is that an interpretation by the Attorney General of Colorado, or is that somebody else's interpretation?
No, the Attorney General, to my knowledge, has not weighed in on it. There are, it's a brand new act, actually, and it's obviously, and to my knowledge has not been widely construed by the courts or commented on yet. There is one particular subsection that does state that a state license shall not issue without a local license. And there's another subsection that refers to the absence of local standards to default to state standards. So it's a question, I guess, who imposes those standards on a local level, either the state minimum standards or some other standard that the county would devise for itself. So the position legally has not changed. The statute hasn't changed since our last discussion, and neither has the law that supports it one way or the other. So the effect, however, of that law was not known, certainly to us, that the absence of a local license would result in a failure to issue, or a state decision not to issue a state license.
So what position could the county take? We could actually issue licenses, or we could say that we're not going to issue licenses, or we could say that the state minimum standards are our standards. What?
Well, the short answer is you could say all of those things. If the county elected not to issue a local license, then I think the result is clear that a state license would not issue. And therefore, if somebody was engaged in this sort of enterprise, the affirmative defense that's afforded under the state statute would not be available in the event of some criminal prosecution, for example. The county can decide to go forward with a local licensing program and default basically to the state standard and not layer anything additional upon that. Or we can develop standards that go beyond the state standards and deal with the particularities of our own community.
Who issues a state license?
That would be the Board of County Commissioners or your designee.
But I mean, the
State license.
The
I'm sorry.
state license.
Local license would be the BOCC or your designee. The state license is done ultimately through the Department of Revenue, I believe. And then it's individual branches.
So the Department of Revenue issues a medical marijuana license.
I believe so.
Uh-huh.
If I'm wrong, that could be correct.
That's correct.
And then what other licenses does the Board of County Commissioners issue?
Liquor, that is it.
We issue a liquor license. So other than that, and is that sort of the same process as they're asking for here? If we didn't issue a liquor license, there would be no liquor license issued.
That's correct. If the local jurisdiction here, Pickens County, did not issue a variety of different licenses associated with the sale, distribution, consumption of alcoholic beverages, then those licenses would not issue. We are the licensing agent for that activity.
And so that would be roughly the model that the state is asking us to be for medical marijuana?
I don't know if I would go so far as to say that's the model, simply because there is a state licensing procedure. For someone with a bar and restaurant, for example, who wants to have a liquor license, the license is issued through the local jurisdiction and not through the state. With medical marijuana and that entire enterprise, there is a dual system, a local system and a statewide system, and the potential for dual enforcement, local and statewide. So it's reflective of an industry that is much more regulated at this point in time than alcohol. It's not exactly the same, but a lot of the same issues can be considered when issuing a license for any of the types of activities associated with medical marijuana, as are considered when issuing a license for the variety of different licenses for involving alcoholic beverages.
Well, there's also a third layer, which is the federal government layer, which doesn't issue licenses at all.
That's correct.
For this. And so that, although it recognizes liquor licenses, I think, or liquor production, or it has a taxation ability for those. There's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. So there's some regulation of alcohol at a federal level. There's none at a federal level for medical marijuana. So that's another nuance. It's not really a nuance. It's another complication.
There's no federal license because the activity is still prohibited at a federal level.
So, George.
And another question on licensing. If you have a home care operation, do they need license?
Home care.
Home caregiver. The
caregiver.
Caregiver.
Caregivers do not need to be licensed if they are not doing that type of activity for anybody but one other individual, I believe. And I think it's limited to one other. In other words, envision the situation of a family member who's being attended to by somebody in their family. That is different to say an individual who is selling medical marijuana or marijuana-infused products to someone who qualifies or who has a prescription and a license to consume those products. Someone who could just go into a dispensary, for example.
So I thought, you have to refresh my memory, I thought a caregiver is allowed to grow up to 6 plants,
Right.
but it's only for one person within that household. It can't be more than one. It can't have more than one client.
I'm fairly sure that is the case.
Hold on. Well, what we'll do is, the question's being addressed to John, And then there are representatives of the state here, and I'll actually ask you to come forward after.
Correct it before it goes any longer, though, also, too.
Well,
if that's what's needed.
No, because the conversation gets very complicated. So John can also defer that question to you. So we'll have you come forward at a later date, once we finish questioning John, and then we'll ask you to come forward. So sorry, George.
No, that's fine.
We'll put John on the spot for this, but there'd be questions he can't answer.
That'd be one.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners at this time? So let's have the representatives of the state come forward, introduce yourselves, state your position, and we'll learn more about this matter from you.
My name is Brian Diet. I'm the senior investigator for the Western Colorado region. I'll deal with all the investigations, and me and my team will deal with all the investigations that will occur with the regulated model with medical marijuana in Colorado.
And when you say investigations, do you mean that the operation is proceeding under state statutes properly? Is that what you're talking about?
To our regulations, yes.
Okay.
We cannot enforce any type of local or county regulations, specifically state statutes that we enforce.
Okay, great.
And I'm Louis Koski. I'm the agent in charge of the Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division's background unit. So I'm responsible for licensing businesses from the time we get the application till the time we hand the applications off to our field enforcement section that does the inspections.
I see. And your field enforcement division is Brian, right?
Yes. For Western Colorado.
Western Colorado. And you both are employed by the state of Colorado, by the by the Department of Revenue?
Yes. Yeah, the Department of Revenue is the umbrella agency, and then underneath of it there's an enforcement group that has a lot of different liquor, racing, gaming, and then there's the Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division, which is housed underneath the Department of Revenue.
Okay, great. Rachel.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I did remember I had a question. I was recently reading, I think it was the Pueblo Chieftain, and it sounded like their city council was interviewing the potential owners and employees of the medical marijuana facilities for past criminal behavior or just some sort of standard similar to liquor license holders. Is that something that the state requires or that individual boards set up and can set up as part of their local?
In terms of background investigation,
Yes.
due diligence on applicants, the way it's set up is the local jurisdiction can do whatever background investigation they choose to. They can make it as robust as they want to, or they can also defer to the state. The state's required by statute to conduct the background investigation. So what we've done is we've gone through the statute and we've identified all the areas that are potential disqualifiers as well as qualifiers, and we've included that in the scope of our background investigation. So when we conduct the background investigation on the people and the businesses that are going to get licensed, we're doing what we feel is covering everything we can possibly cover within the act. And then the local jurisdictions sometimes are doing their own. Sometimes they're deferring to that, but then they also may have things that they want to do that are more strict than what the state requirement is, and so then they're doing the background investigation from a local perspective, looking at those things specific to the local jurisdiction. I'll give you a really good example. There's a number of local jurisdictions in the Front Range who have restrictions on how close centers can be from each other. I think Lakewood has it at 3,000 feet or something along those lines. But they have those restrictions, and so because they're not a state minimum, we don't necessarily look at those as part of our background investigation, but the city would.
Thank you.
Rob.
Yeah, just a question for Brian. You said you are the senior investigator for the Western Colorado. Can you describe what that region is and what it is you investigate? Do you investigate sellers, growers, users, doctors? What's the scope of what you're investigating?
Okay. Covering Western Colorado, if you look at a map of Colorado, start at Vail, draw a line north and south. Me and my team cover everything west of that, north and south. We investigate anything to do with the regulated model of of medical marijuana. We don't have anything to do with regulating and enforcing the caregiver model. That would include issuing the registry identification cards. We absolutely have nothing to do with that. Caregiver status, the doctors that are recommending medical marijuana use, nothing to do with that. That's all done through Colorado Department of Health and Public Environment, CDPHE. So you have really two models to look at. You have the caregiver model, which was enacted in 2000 by the voters of Colorado. That's how that all came about. Then we have the regulated model, which we oversee, which includes the medical marijuana centers or dispensaries, their growing operations, and the MIPS, which are the marijuana-infused products, any manufacturing of that. We have complete oversight of what happens at those three facilities.
Essentially, we're the retail side.
And we had questions before about the caregiver model.
Caregiver model, if the individual was a caregiver, they could grow for themselves and 5 additional people. Not more than 6 plants per patient, not more than 2 finished dried ounces per patient. There are some variances. Some doctors will recommend a higher dose of medical marijuana product to be used, so there might be some variances in there. But again, that all goes through CDPHE. That all gets reported to them. We have nothing to do with the doctors and the patients and the red cards. That's all done through a completely separate department than ours.
So there's no requirement that they be household members?
No.
Can I follow
Yes,
up on
sir.
that? So, again, what you're saying is a caregiver, they're allowed 6 plants per patient?
Correct.
And they're allowed to include themselves plus 5 other patients?
Correct.
And they don't need a license, but their patients need to have a
Registry identification.
registered card from a different doctor that you don't oversee. So it's a different department that oversees that part.
Yes.
Part of it.
Yes.
Okay. The other question I have, as long as you're on topic here, is I thought there was a law that said that within a county or municipality, if you have a dispensary that's operating, that's licensed, then that dispensary has to get X percentage of their product from within the county?
You're referring to what we call the 70-30 rule. There's a state law in our statutory book that requires the regulated model that we oversee to manufacture and grow 70% of their medical marijuana that they're going to use. The other 30% they can go and purchase from another one of our licensed MMCs, our medical marijuana centers. This is our attempt to keep outside bad guys from supplying the marijuana to this industry. So by requiring to manufacture and grow 70%, they have to meet that requirement. And then if they choose, they can go to another one of our licensed centers and purchase a 30% additional from them. So with our tracking, the way we have it on a monthly basis, we should see how many patients they have, how many plants are cultivating for all those patients, and any type of sale to another dispensary or purchase from another dispensary. Those are all on a monthly type basis through we have an entire another team, our accounting team, that tracks all of that.
So that's 70% that they're obligated to grow themselves. They can grow that anywhere. It doesn't have to be in the licensing county.
That's correct. There's no state requirement for that. Now, there could be potentially some local, if you've heard that in the past, it may have been specific to a county that has required them to grow it all within their county, so they don't. So what they may be thinking is that they can isolate a little bit more the transportation of the medicine from the grow operation to the center location, and then they know that then it's all encapsulated into their county. That might be a possibility, but there is no state requirement that says if a center's in Aspen, it has to grow its medicine within the county. if it's up to you, you could grow it wherever they wanted to in the state.
And then the last question is, for the grow sites, there was a state statute saying that they had to be held in secret. That has since gone away, so grow sites can be public knowledge?
Yes, that's correct. All of the previous grow under the previous regulation, they were considered secretive type thing, but that's not so anymore.
Yes, sir. Center and dispensary, you're using those words interchangeably?
Yes.
And just so I understood that clear, each center or dispensary has to grow 70% of, they have to be a grower as well.
Correct.
They have to grow 70% of their product.
Yeah, one of the big changes that came out of House Bill 1284 from, which would have been 2009-10 time frame for that legislative session, was the vertical integrated model. Prior to House Bill 1284 coming into effect, you had a lot of different companies that operated what they called dispensaries at the time, and then they had other companies that were doing the wholesale growing, so they pretty much were just companies dedicated to that. After House Bill 1284 was passed, what they did is they took the grow operations and the dispensaries, started calling them centers, and then the centers, they had to be vertically aligned, so the grow operation and the center have to be all part of the exact same legal entity. So you can't, when we're licensing, we won't even let, if it was Lewis LLC, the grower, and Bryan LLC, the center, we couldn't keep that same model. We had to somehow integrate those two into one company, and that's something that we're actually working on with a lot of the applicants today, because it was a pretty big hurdle for companies to have to merge like that.
Subsequently, during that process Lewis was talking about, if we found that they were not vertically aligned, some of the times that whole application would be denied because they couldn't come to terms. They didn't want to be under one entity. He wanted to be the grower, he wanted to be the center, and they couldn't come together to form one company or one form, and subsequently they're gone.
Rachel? That seems to make a lot of sense to me, the vertical integration, so you wouldn't have one person saying, well, I didn't know my supplier was doing this, or I didn't know the storefront was doing that, and they share responsibility. But I was wondering if you might be able to kind of walk us through a little bit of what is the regulatory scheme that the dispensaries and the grow sites need to comply with. I saw a presentation at Colorado Counties, Inc., and they used the term from seed to sale in terms of tracking the waste product, the weighting, and the measurements, and kind of how do you operate this regulatory scheme?
That's a big one to kind of digest. We regulate everything up until how they dispose of in their trash. So if you can imagine some of the things I look for when I go into, I'll inspect your trash to make sure that you're not throwing away just unused marijuana product. Can't do that. So it has to be rendered unusable and ground up with other items and rendered unusable. So
Probably go over it in a little bit more general terms.
Yeah,
And you have some detailed questions about those, but the way it happens right now is that first of all, we're still in this period where the companies had to have been somehow they had to have been locally approved by July 1st of 2010, right? They had to apply with us by August 1st, 2010, and pay the fees, and then they had to certify, the centers had to certify to us by September 1st that they were growing 70% of your medicine. So a center today is operating legally if those conditions could exist. So they met July 1st with you all, they applied with us, and they met the August 1st cultivation deadline. So local approval and state filing deadline is what they're operating legally under state law under. And then subsequent to that, in July of this year, all of our rules passed. So there's some 19 rules that we passed with a group of rule makers that came from pretty much every stakeholder in the industry, from within the industry, law enforcement, etc. And those things cover a lot of different areas, not the least of which is unlawful financial assistance. So as part of the background investigation, we're looking to try and do the best we can with the volume of cases we have at the moment to understand where the money came from and trying to show that it came from legitimate sources, by way of example. It talks about how in the rules that all the ownership has to be disclosed, but it also covers other things, restricted areas. So what constitutes a restricted area? Who can be in a restricted area? We cover surveillance. We cover the types of locks that have to be on doors in those particular areas, and then we also cover unlawful acts in the rules. So you can't partake in the product at the center. Or the grow location. Those types of things are all part of the regulatory scheme, and right now we're at the beginning phases of doing our second round of rulemaking, where we're going to be looking at a couple of different things, which include the shared ownership grows that came out of part of House Bill 1043, where before you had to have distinctly different grow operations for each center. Well, under the new law, someone who had common ownership, which has to be determined by rule yet, they could potentially have multiple grows for centers under the same roof, but they'd still have to have them separated. It's just undetermined yet what that's going to look like. So it's kind of a big picture. If you're at all familiar with gaming in Colorado and some of the rules and stuff that exist in terms of internal control, minimum procedures, the surveillance piece of it, what type of cameras you have, all of that's included in the big regulatory scheme that we're in the process of implementing right now.
Can I follow up, Michael? What is the surveillance piece?
Probably one of our most strictest that we have out there. There's only a handful of surveillance equipment types that we have mandated that dispensary owners can use. They have to meet a certain camera requirement. The wiring has to be very specific as to what type of wiring they use. You have to be able to see at night. If they're outside, they have to be heated surveillance. Again, recording 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When we do get our surveillance equipment up to date on our end as far as the products that our department needs to, we'll be able to input a center's IP address on their cameras, and from our offices, whether it be in Denver, Grand Junction, wherever we're at, we can view any licensed establishment anywhere in the state.
So you can see the activities going on within that establishment?
Yes, at all times. They have to keep a minimum of 20 of the current days recorded and an additional 20 days off-site as well. So you're going to have 40 days of recording nonstop. So once they reach 40 days of recording, one day goes off, one day comes on, one day goes off, and it's a continual 40 days that's going to be recorded.
Yes.
Do you do that for grow sites as well?
Yes.
Grow sites and dispensaries?
And the MIPS.
And the MIPS.
Let me ask a question. I brought it up, but there's this conflict with federal regulations of marijuana, and certainly I think that was one of our concerns, that we would be caught, the county would be caught, between federal regulations and state regulations, and we didn't know who would be prosecuted. We thought possibly it could be anyone of our administration who issued a license, at least from the federal point of view. So what's your view on that? How do you get around that dilemma?
Our view on that is we don't claim to prognosticate what the federal government's going to do in this instance. We can't deny the fact that we have state law that allows for medical marijuana in the state of Colorado. We also can't deny that there's statutes on the books for the federal government that prohibit it. So the reality is as we continue to work through what we think we are in a process, we don't really take the time right now to really focus on what the federal government's going to be doing, because we don't know what they're going to do. They're going to make the choices that they elect to make in this process, and so we're continuing to move full steam ahead with the state law and implementing the regulatory process that the legislature and the governor both signed off on.
So then to get to local concern, which is the state has said to Picken County, and I don't know if it was you as representatives,
I think it was both of us.
said that, well, we needed to institute some sort of licensing process within the county, or otherwise there wouldn't be a license issued by the state. Is that correct?
Well, if I could clarify, because I know I had one conversation with Mr. Ely, and what we want to make really clear today is we're not here to influence you one way or the other with respect to what you decide to do with medical marijuana in your county. What we do want to do is we want to partner with you. And by partnering with you, what that means to us, at least here on the onset, is that we can be here to answer the questions that you have, clarify whatever you need clarified, so you know what the implications are from the state perspective for any one of those three avenues that you put quite well earlier in the meeting with respect to the choices that you have. And so, we have at the state level, we have reviewed the statutes, and what we've come up with is that if a local jurisdiction takes a neutral stance on licensing, so meaning you don't license but you don't prohibit it, there's a statute within the Act that puts us into a position as a state agency, and I believe it's 305 we need to look at, but it basically says we cannot give a state license to a company that has applied for a license that they don't have, that they haven't been approved and licensed locally. So that's what kind of paints us in the corner from a state perspective. If there's a local jurisdiction that outright bans it, then it's pretty clear. If there's a county that licenses with specific circumstances, that makes it easier as well. But in the middle, for us, we just don't see that there's any middle ground for the state.
So if the county were to say, have a licensing procedure that said this particular entity meets all state requirements and that's sufficient for us, is that sufficient for the state?
Well, the statute, and I think that one's in Section 301, that statute is the statute that says that a local jurisdiction can adopt the state minimums as guidelines for licensing. So it doesn't just say that if you elect between now and July 1st, 2012 to not integrate any specific Pitkin County rules and regulations, you could simply do that, and then you would use the state standard when determining whether or not you were going to license a particular company. But it doesn't. I don't read it as saying, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't read it as saying that you could just say that's what we're doing and still not license, because then the next statute over, it's the state one, says we shall not issue a license unless it's locally approved and licensed.
The best example to look at it real closely as your liquor licensing. Liquor licensing for the state does the same thing. There's a state liquor license, there's a local liquor license. It's a dual licensing authority. You cannot have a state license without a local license and vice versa. Same thing here too. We're not going to issue a state medical marijuana license unless Pitkin County does. They have to be in full force and effect. So use the example of your liquor licensing for something very similar to this.
Are there any other questions from the board? I'd like to open it up to the public a little bit. Jack?
Well, I'm not sure it's a question, just some observations if I might share. This issue is complex, like quite a few of the things we do, whether it's land use code or dealing with oil and gas, commission issues and in our environment, or the provision of services, whatever. I was a little taken aback when we did become educated as to the fact that we did need local licensing, consistent with just what we heard, analogous to alcohol, for example, local and state. So when that occurred, and I understand the jeopardy that local businesses could be in if in fact we do not create a licensing program, I decided to get a bit educated. And what I did is call up a local business owner who had contacted us when this became an issue, so that's how the link occurred, and actually did a site visit, and a little while into it, I got my little sign that, said I was a visitor, because it's very, very controlled, what I found. And
Candid camera?
and certainly the camera was there, and it was very, very educational, because for me, and my responsibility as a commissioner, what we have to decide today is how to proceed. To me, there's not a question of whether we should or should not. There's no question that we need to have local licensing. I believe in medical marijuana and its benefits for those who have deemed able to access it through a doctor's prescription and a license through the state. I was concerned, because I know nothing about this currently, of how this would impact neighborhoods and how business would be done, etc. It was quite an education in the local grow operation. Not only cameras, but there are plants at different levels of growth with names on them of the patients. I was concerned, the site that I went to, there are multiple businesses. I didn't notice this being some kind of outstanding business where it'd raise a red flag, meeting on for security reasons. And I only have one example, so I don't know what's out there. But I was very pleased to see that there was management of air quality in this local grow operation, because I'm made aware more through hearsay, because I'm not familiar, that growing this in quantities really has an odor. And so what I found, that there wasn't an impact to the neighbors, other businesses in the neighborhood. Part of our responsibilities, certainly as commissioners, is impacts to others from business, for example. Then as I became more educated, I had a desire, and I went to the local dispensary that's associated with the grow operation, just as you all talked about the 70-30 thing, which I have an idea only based on what that means. Cameras, separate sale area, a lobby, where you show your ID, etc., and it's hugely controlled. At that point, and I had all these questions, I was given a copy of Colorado Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division rules, and it's just amazing. I was concerned, and I was one of the Pickens County representatives as CCI as this evolved through the legislature through 2 sessions, and I still didn't understand a lot. And this has been quite an education by doing these site visits. I believe that golly, just a few examples about licensing, handling procedures, IDs, background checks, medical marijuana center sales, that's actually how it goes, the security requirements, the lock standards, the video surveillance, storage and transportation. This is so regulated that from the point of grow to the point of arrival, there's weighing and things that go on to verify what started here, arrived here, and it's all copacetic and legal. So I'm feeling way comfortable about licensing, because, and I believe these gentlemen certainly have a huge responsibility to make sure that this goes down according to the law. No leeway, no exceptions. This is how we do it. And I think this being a new industry, people need to march to the drummer, no question about it. So I'm comfortable from the slight education I've had, because I'm sure there's a lot more, to know that we should proceed. Proceed for what I think is just one of the medical options, whether you have a Western doctor who believes in X amount of methodologies to get well, including taking pills and narcotics and all this stuff, to this, which is what I understand is just one of the many different ways of treating illnesses. So I support the medical marijuana constitutional amendment, and though I didn't realize it for years, only until the last few years, the only way to get this done and done right is through regulation. So we're here, and we need to step up to the plate as a board, I hope. My general sense is minimal rules and regulations locally. I like adopting the state. I'm not sure if there are a few tweaks we might do, but that's a conversation that we haven't had and can only go further if, in fact, we decide today that there'll be a further conversation. So, everything's on the table here. I believe that this can be done safely, and the way to do it is to have minimal licensing requirements, because I have great faith after doing this, and I'll be certainly interested in knowing what the reserve sections are that blank. Those have to, I guess, through rulemaking, will evolve. That's a whole another piece that's not here. But I believe that the responsibility that these gentlemen and their team have is going to ensure that this option is available to the product in a safe way. We've heard the comments about, mostly 25 to 34-year-old males, a preponderance, and only a few doctors. Well, I have two thoughts on that. One, when the rush to get licenses happened, there was a huge amount of applications and a real tough time going through them. So there's a preponderance of some demographic versus others, and I don't have much more feedback on that. As far as really what our responsibility is, the state constitution, this is part of it, and in 2000 the voters voted this in, and I personally don't have any desire to get involved with the federal government. I think they ought to deal with the real issues in this country, and for example, I very much appreciate what the state of Colorado is doing. This is an article, state wants marijuana to be reclassified as a medical element. Couldn't do better, because that's where it ought to lie. And Michael rightfully has raised the issue, because we don't avoid issues here. We'll take them head on. That is an issue, it's an unknown, but I think if we do a minimalist way, we can protect our public, our neighborhoods, and allow an option locally. I just would hate to see, because the state law, I believe, also says everyone has the ability to grow 6 plants who has a card. Now, I would not like to see, I live in a 27-unit complex, a condo complex. I wouldn't like to see 14 people growing with, well, I don't even know. It used to be 40 years ago, black lights and, all this stuff, so I'm dated. But I don't really want to see all this individual growing, and for all the reasons. One of the things I learned at the grow site and the dispensary was they have to have professionals. They had professionals do the construction, the wiring, all of this and that. Well, gee, there's another side benefit, which we haven't talked about the economy and people at work, whether in this industry or construction. That's a plus. Tax revenues, ooh, that's another plus. So I think we can do this right, and I'm hoping our board can see to the positives. One last comment about caregivers. Gee, a caregiver in an individual living condition might have 6 patients of 6 plants, of 36 plants also. That just, and the law says you can do that, but I believe the better alternative is dispensaries and grow sites, totally regulated, looked in, and actually, and I was told, hey, someone's looking, it was real time, right? The cameras are? Yeah, so can't do better than that until it evolves to maybe a little less regulation, but absolute compliance.
Are there any other questions? I'd like to open this up to the public, and so there's only about 45 minutes or so for the public to make comments, so.
Mine was a really weak, or short question, relatively short, but we had asked before among ourselves, what about waste products in terms of water quality? Are there regulations related to how people dispose of their water, or, I don't know enough about it either, but that was something that's come forward.
That I'm aware of, there's nothing in the state statute that works directly with water per se, but as Brian was mentioned earlier, we certainly have some, we're accounting for all of the waste and making sure that it's properly disposed of. If that was something that was of concern to you, and again, I don't know enough about that process to know whether or not it's even an issue, but if it was something you're concerned about, certainly something you could work through at the local level.
Okay, that answers my question. You do not have regulation on the fertilizer and the water quality upon disposal?
Not that I'm aware of.
We do regulate all of the pesticides and make sure that the grow operations are not using federally banned pesticide type things, and those are inside our regulations as well too.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, a couple of small, quick questions, and then we'll get on. I'll let it go for now, but hopefully we'll schedule more time on this because I don't think this next hour is going to be sufficient if we're going to spend 45 minutes with public comment. But first question is July 2012, this year, if we don't have something enacted by then, what happens to our existing license holders?
Well, I think the state's prepared right now. We're waiting to find out what you all want to do because we're prepared to move forward with the applications if there's going to be no licensing. So we're not going to do. We're going to take everything that's in unincorporated Pitkin County and move forward with processing with the information that we have. So when July 1st, 2012 comes around, I think what's important to understand is that there's some potential implications for that with respect to whether or not they're operating legally.
So technically, you'd run in and shut them down as an enforcer, what you're saying, because they're operating illegally at that point.
I don't know that that's the case. I'd have to do some research on that.
We definitely need the answer to that. I'll just say that I'm in favor of, Jack's direction in terms of finding a way to regulate this here within our county to allow this to continue the medical marijuana practices that have been voted in statewide. I do want to also say that I'm, as an elected official and someone sitting on this side of the table, I'm going to make sure that our general public is protected as well, and that if the state isn't protecting the general public in the way that we find sufficient here, we need to answer those questions and make sure that they're protected. Some real quick questions while I have the state people. How is this taxed?
Sales tax.
Just a regular sales tax. Have there been any violations, and how are violations handled in your district as an enforcer?
Violations in general?
Someone's scale number doesn't add up. What's the penalty?
I've issued everything from a warning letter to a full-on seizure of the complete business in Carbondale. Yeah, I don't know if you're aware of what happened down in Carbondale. Dispensary was caught selling another Schedule I substance from that facility. There was an arrest warrant. We went in cooperation with the drug task force there, and I seized every medical marijuana product that he had and destroyed it.
And just to kind of clarify that a little bit too, if the scale doesn't match up, that's not the approach we take. So
That would be cause for a warning letter or something like that, just so that we can get their attention, bring them back into compliance. Remember, we're a twofold type thing. First and foremost, we're making sure that they're complying with our regulations. So we're going to educate and we're going to get them into compliance depending on what type of and severity of the violation. If it's something like what happened down in Carbondale, we're going to jump other bases and get to a final denial process and get rid of that problem. So there's warning letters up to complete denial of their application.
How has the state handled changing other protection laws regarding the use of medical marijuana in our society?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, well, maybe this is a question for Joe, who I saw come in. You know, do we anticipate, with the allowance of medical marijuana, which is already allowed at this point in our county, writing policies and procedures that include the abuse of medical marijuana or marijuana in general, and how will that change? I mean, if you see someone on the street smoking a joint, do you ask him for his medical marijuana card? And I don't know what the laws are regarding
Public use.
public
Use
use.
is unlawful, completely illegal.
Let me go back. You can't use marijuana, medical or not, in public. As far as your other question goes, Rob, we have had a few, if you would, reports of people growing, and in the reports we've had, we've contacted compliance. These people are usually compliant, and we have not found one yet that's out of compliance, or that doesn't have their paperwork. I shouldn't say out of compliance, because that's their job. But as far as their paperwork and their legality, we have come across none, and we've had a few reports of grows.
And then the last thing I'd like to ask, just for future, is, what is the city of Aspen doing in terms of their handling it, and exactly what are their regulations, and other counties, what models do we have? What spectrum of using the state regulations is one option, absolutely, but I'm assuming that there is another option out there, which is the state regulations plus.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is, or if we should do that. But just in closing, I do agree with Jack that we do need to find a way to make this work, and I do think that there are tremendous benefits to medical marijuana and those aspects. And I'm not saying these things because I don't want this to happen. I'm saying these things because my job up here is to protect all citizens, not just people with medical marijuana cards and not just business owners. I own a liquor license, and I would be just as stringent on my liquor license as I will be on medical marijuana to make sure that our public is protected.
Thank you, Rob. So now,
A couple of questions, Michael.
okay, that's fine. It just limits the
I
public.
understand, but it is what it is. John, Healy, do we have the opportunity to grandfather in existing operations and set a quota, or saying this is the amount that we believe is viable economically and socially?
The range of action, as I read the statute, for the local licensing authority is very broad, almost without much restriction at all, other than you can't go below state standard. The idea of grandfathering in is maybe it's better expressed that you do have the ability to review applicants and determine that they are qualified for a license. And then they can take that application to the state. And if the state determines that they're qualified for a license, then a license can issue. Two licenses will issue and allow that business to continue. The local licensing authority can also consider an appropriate level of activity for the community or any given neighborhood within the community to determine how many grow sites or how many dispensaries or what the density might be or any number of factors like that that would limit a open proliferation, for example, of even, the potential of sites being licensed. So those are factors you can consider. I guess I wouldn't necessarily call it a grandfathering, because you have to review, you have to approve a license at some point.
Lance, can you tell us currently how many dispensaries are in Pickens County and how many grow sites are in Pickens County?
I have my name here, Lance Clark, Pickens County Community Development. No. All I know is who came to the county prior to July 1st, 2010, and said, I would like to make application to the county under the state statute, and the deadline is July 1st, 2010. So we know everyone who came in at that time. Anyone who may have entered into the business since then without contacting the county, I have no knowledge of. I'd have to look in my file, but there were roughly, I think there were 6 grow sites, 2 dispensaries, and 2 infused products people who came forward prior to July 1st, 2010, and indicate that they had a location and wanted to go into business and intended to make application to the state by August 1st, 2010.
And dispensaries, per our land use code, can only happen in 2 places, basically, at the Airport Business Center and in Redstone.
Yeah, according to the land use code, when those people came in July of 2010, not having any specific regulations in our code with regard to medical marijuana businesses, we made an interpretation, which we often do for new uses. The interpretation was that a medical marijuana dispensary would be treated the same as a drugstore or a liquor store. And a drugstore or a liquor store would only be allowed by zoning in the Aspen Area Business Center and in the BC Village Commercial Zone District in Redstone. And then we also made the interpretation that a grow site was similar to any other agricultural business and could be allowed in any zone district where agricultural uses were allowed. And that was prior to us creating any kind of individual land use code standards. That was an interpretation that we made.
And as we go forward, I would like to see whether we get some actual numbers of dispensaries and grow sites. One of the concerns that we heard as we went out into the community this past summer to talk about dispensaries and grow sites to the different caucuses in the rural areas, pretty much it was unanimous amongst all those caucuses and neighborhoods. They did not want to see any new additional grow sites in their neighborhoods, and they did not want to see any dispensaries either. So listening to our citizens tells me that there is a limit in terms of at least the potential opportunity for additional dispensaries and or grow sites, at least in my mind.
Is that it from the commissioner?
For now.
So I'd like to get some public comment on it. Typically, we try to limit public comment or questions to about 3 minutes, and you can see how difficult it is to limit the commissioners. So there's a lot of people here. So if you can really make a succinct, clear statement, that's preferable. And if you have questions for the representatives from the state or our county attorney, you essentially address them to me, and I'll pass them to the proper person. So raise your hand, I'll call on you, state your name, and then I'll give you some time. So are there members of the public who wish to make a comment at this time? I can close it. There we go.
My name is Lauren Mayton. I'm an attorney in our valley. My office is 520 East Cooper. I represent several businesses in Pickens County, cannabis businesses in Pickens County. I also have a law firm that's both based here in Aspen and in Denver. We represent a lot of people throughout the state. Law firm is Edson, Mayton, and Matz. I'm Lauren Mayton. That That being said, I wanted to direct your attention because of your questions. It's not about my position in this, other than I hope that you find a way to permit these businesses to succeed and thrive in your county. One of the issues you had, Rob, in particular, you asked about July 1 of 2012. In statute 12-43.3-301, that I know Mr. Koski referenced, as well as -305, a lot of this has to do with the exact questions that all of you have asked. One is that you're not allowed to issue a local license unless the governing body of that city, count, or county has adopted an ordinance or has adopted a resolution containing specific standards adopted prior to July 1 of 2012. If you do not adopt something with your own standards by July 1 of 2012, it appears as though you will simply be deferring to the state. Because what it says is that if it's not adopted prior to July 1 of 2012, then a local licensing authority shall, as you know is mandatory language, shall consider the minimum licensing requirements of Part 3 when issuing their license. So the issue became, are you required to do everything that the state does, or are you simply required to simply consider all of the things that the state considers? Do you have to do your own background checks? Do you have to do your own site checks? Do you have to do all those things? I would say no, that you can in fact defer to the state to be doing those things and defer to their minimum requirements that are required. Subsection 305 states that, again, you shall not issue, the state shall not issue a state license until and unless the local licensing authority has approved the application. Well, that application is the business application. It's one that every business in here has filed. If you look at the bottom of that, it simply says what you have to check off. It's pretty basic. It says date application filed with the local authority. So you could have, like Aspen has done, here's your business license out, here's your business application. Pretty basic. I'm a business, I want to do this business, here's my application, here's my $30. And they say, okay, 24 hours later, you get your business license. That's as simple and as basic as their application process is. It says date of local authority hearing, if held. You don't have to have them, but if you do, you mark off on the application that you have. It asks if you have in fact adopted your own resolutions, and if not, there's a box that says, no, I have not. We, as a county, have not adopted additional ordinances or resolutions. I don't think this is a huge process for you to get into or to delve into. I respect Rob Ittner's indication that he'd like to protect the members of the community, and I respect that and I understand that. They give you suggestions. In fact, it also provides suggestions a way to limit the number of businesses. If you say that there can be no more than one business within 3,000 feet of another, well, there can't be. So you are limiting it that way. If you're talking about zoning, well, zoning is only allowed in B2. Well, that kind of limits it to the ABC. I thought Holland Hills was part of it too, but limits it to the ABC. But that's how you can limit without saying we're only going to allow 5. Okay, there are other ways to be able to harness that. But in that 303 is where you will find the other possibilities. It talks about distance restrictions between premises. It talks about reasonable restrictions on the size of the licensed premises. It talks about requirements necessary to ensure the control of the premises, the ease of enforcement, things like that. So it does give you some guidance within the actual statute itself. As it relates to primary caregivers, just for your awareness, you can grow more than 6 plants per patient. It has to do with the upward allotments. So I understand your concerns about the grow operations and what have you. That's something that you too can also regulate.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that. Are there any other members of the public who wish to comment at this time? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Damian Horgan. I work at Alternative Medical Solutions, which is a dispensary here in Aspen. I believe it's also the dispensary and the grow site that was mentioned earlier as far as having some side business by this gentleman here. And I want to say, just generally, it sounded like a very positive thing, the attitude that everybody has here. But there are more questions, obviously, that everybody has. And I just want to say, anything that we can do as far as answer questions, or if anyone wants to come take a look, anything we can do to help, get you to the spot where you can make a decision, we're more than happy to do.
Thank you. Let me check to see if there's other members of the public who wish to comment, and then we'll come back to you. Are there other members of the public who wish to comment at this time? You're all here. It must have been important. You should speak up now. Yes, sir. There's a gentleman in the back there.
My name's Garrett, and I represent one of the dispensaries at the ABC, Kind Wellness Center, and our patients there. And there's definitely a need, just like Jack said, for this business in our community. We have a lot of patients that, that need this medicine. Just for one example, we have a disabled patient that was in the hospital a few months ago, and he was miserable. He was on morphine and tons of pain medication. He just couldn't be comfortable. One of his friends went in and brought him an edible, half of an edible. He said he took it. He was immediately relieved. And after that, and he got out of the hospital, he came and signed up with our dispensary so he could continue to purchase our products and help continue his way of life, basically. So there is a huge need for it. We also employ 7 people that include local attorneys and contractors. We're spending money in the community, advertising, all that stuff. The money that we make at our dispensary, we're going to be putting right back into the community. And we just want you guys to maybe at least just adopt the minimum state laws requirements. That would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a gentleman in front here.
I represent a dispensary down Valley in
What's your name, please?
Michael Sandner. The owner of the dispensary has been a resident for 30 years in Aspen. He owned a business painting homes and all over the valley. Had a great business for many, many years. In 2008, when the economy collapsed, so did his business. He started a medical marijuana center down in Holland Hills. Has everything all up to standards according to the state, with the cameras at the grow up and cameras at the dispensary. I recently moved here from Chicago. I'm a budsman for him. I'm also a medical marijuana patient. When I was 14 years old, I broke my neck and my back in 7 spots. I was on morphine, Vicodin, muscle relaxers, Flexerol, everything for many, many years. I've never had a surgery. I did all alternative medical rehabilitation. I ran medical clinics for Leonard Cirillo and for an oncology department at Rush University Medical Center. So I have a lot of knowledge when it comes to neurologic disabilities and the advantages that medical marijuana has on it. I recently have used for 17 years, and ever since I came off all the pharmaceutical drugs, I've had little to no problems when it comes to my kidney and my liver, my stomach, and all the other issues related to what the pharmaceutical drugs can do and how they can shut your entire system down. I just wanted to voice my opinion and say that I think this would be great for the county, and my boss does pay taxes like any other dispensary here in this county does, I'm sure. And I just wanted to share as a patient and as an employee.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to comment at this time? So essentially, we'll close the, well, Lauren, you...
I just wanted to make sure y'all knew there are another 32 pages of rules coming. These are just the proposals that I know that Mr. Koski at least referenced, but there are more rules coming. This is not a scenario where they're done. They're going to continue to the state will continue to do the oversight and the rules that they think are truly necessary to protect the public. So I just think you should know that there are more rules coming. The ownership issue, the vertical integration that we're talking about, we're talking about changing that to a 40% ownership versus what was before kind of a free-for-all. The point I'm trying to make is that they really are honing in on some of the gray areas or the holes, and they are patching those holes and protecting our community. So, just so you know, those are coming.
Thank you, Lauren. So I'm going to close the public comment portion at this time and come back to the commissioners. And I think what we'll try to do is get a consensus on the direction we'd like staff to go in on this. So Jack's already said he's in favor of some sort of licensing procedure, I take it. George, what's your feeling?
A couple of things. I'm going to refer to a fax that was sent to all of us from a doctor, board-certified psychiatry. And Colorado, I really see as being a test case for the nation. I think that the ultimate goal is to try to move the issue of medical marijuana onto the legalization of marijuana. And so that's where I think Colorado is, because it's so easy to get onto the ballot, it's easy to pursue these things. I think I have a real concern in terms of the potential abuse of medical marijuana. And I'll just quote a few points that is in this fax. An article by the American Journal of Psychiatry, August 2011, lists the concerns with the medical marijuana situation in Colorado. Since the federal government decided not to pursue legislation here, there's been almost a tenfold increase in the number of medical marijuana cards given in Colorado in the last 3 years. Colorado now has double the amount of marijuana cards issued as the entire state of California, which has 4 times our population. 70% of these cards, of all cards, are issued to males. The majority are being between the ages of 25 to 34. Most recent data from 2010 indicates that 75% of marijuana cards issued come from one of 15 physicians in the state. Of those 15, 5 have had disciplinary actions taken against them. So there is, obviously with anything, there's opportunities for abuse, and certainly this allows that to occur. Those are some of my concerns. The ability to get into hands marijuana to youth and to teens, it's the same concern that we have when it comes to alcohol. I think alcohol and marijuana and other drugs are really, they're gateway drugs to worse situations, certainly for our youth and our kids. So that's, I don't know how we can address that. We have to really feel comfortable that we have some very strict enforcement available and guidelines, which I'm hearing that are in existence now. We have to continue looking at that. I think since we have this deadline of July 1st, 2012, and there are some more rules that are coming, I've heard, we've got some time to continue this discussion. I still believe that if we are going to allow the licensing, we need to limit this. And we need to limit this not only in numbers, but in terms of certain areas. Again, given our feedback from our constituents, I know that the citizens down valley are not interested in having any additional dispensaries. They are not interested in having any grow sites in their neighborhoods. So I think we have to take that into consideration if and where and when we're going to license dispensaries and grow sites and where they may occur, because I think we'll hear an outcry from the down valley residents against that, and we heard that this past summer.
So, Georgia, would you support staff direction to look into licensing and subsequent, what that would entail within the county as a whole?
Yeah, I would support the idea of pursuing this a little bit further, ensuring the safety and welfare of our citizens, ensuring the safety and welfare of our citizens who do not want to have grow sites and dispensaries in their neighborhoods and in their areas.
Okay, so, Rob, what's your feeling about what staff direction we should give?
I think we should see a range of what our options are between using the state standards and adopting a state standard plus scenario, whether it's limiting number of sites, whether it's putting other regulations on it, whether it's looking into creating regulations for caregivers and that aspect, whether or not we have the potential of doing that. I mean, I think there's a lot of different questions that I have regarding protecting the general public, and there are a lot of unanswered questions regarding that, and I want to make sure that that happens.
Okay. So, Rachel, what's your view? What's staff direction? You've heard sort of the consensus is to give staff direction for licensing, probably limited licensing, but licensing nonetheless, so.
Yeah, I kind of agree with the points that Rob has raised and others across the table. This is a complex issue that brings up morality issues, and legal issues, and safety and concern issues, and I think a lot of those can be debated back and forth with a lot of different pros and cons. It seems that when someone is in need of the type of medical treatment and medical relief that marijuana can offer, if it's not available to them through a dispensary model or something, you're pushing it back underground. And I think the more it's an underground activity, the more likely there are individuals who may be providing that gateway that we're here talked about. Both in association with other drugs or just, not caring or not being held to any standard or to any, enforcement activities. And so I think that, licensing is a better cleanup overall. And, I have struggled with some of the morality issues and public welfare and safety. And at some level, I think a government can only go so far. We license liquor and alcohol and everything like that, but if someone wants to take home a full gallon of whiskey and drink the whole thing in one night, they'll do it. And you can't necessarily prevent people from making bad choices with their lives. And it's ironic little side note, but I had read today that the chef Paula Deen has come clean and admitted that she's had type 2 diabetes since 2008. And every day on her show, she's promoting these recipes with pig fat and butter and sugar and how delicious this all is. And, she chuckled when they said, well, did your cooking give your husband his heart attack? And, so I think people can make mistakes and abuse all sorts of substances and use them for all sorts of reasons. So overall, I think that this is the state has gone a long way to fully flesh out a regulatory scheme that's competent and that's thorough and that will continue to be refined over time. And, I think we have a chance to participate in that type of rulemaking that goes forward. They always have hearings on potential rule changes and improvements. So I'm in favor of moving forward with the Pickens County licensing scheme as well. I think that the types of issues we've heard about before, although we didn't necessarily talk about them as fully today, 1,000 feet or 1,500 feet from any school premises. I think that I want to think very carefully about the issue of limits in terms of, is it a sheer number or is it a proximity or is it through zoning? We've always had a sense, and I think of this more from the Liquor License Board, that we don't medallionize the license, so that, the license itself in communities that say we only have 50 liquor licenses, that meets the needs of the neighborhood. So when someone goes out of business, it could be a horrible, horrible location, but someone will pay them $125,000 just to get the liquor license and then move it somewhere else, because that license itself has become a gold medallion for them. And I don't know that we want to create value in the license for people. But on the other hand, I also, and at a certain level, a free market will take care of itself in terms of whether operation is well run or goes out of business or whatever. So, I want to look at those issues, but in general, it's yes, move forward with a licensing scheme and kind of the advice of seeing what other templates, what other additional layers of community protection have been added by other counties will be helpful to helping formulate those.
Thank you, Rachel. So the board direction is for staff to investigate licensing, starting at minimum state standards and perhaps a few permutations beyond that. I think what will happen is once we know what those minimum state standards are, we'll investigate or we'll ask questions about what the implications are for Pickens County. So what density is, what those possibilities would be, and we'll probably refine it at the next work session about licensing. So Yes, Rachel.
I agree with that, Michael, and perhaps, we've lagged back to let this unfold a little bit, frankly, and at least my perspective is, and to see the state scheme come into play. But it might be something that staff can inquire of some of the other counties that have adopted, layers beyond the state to say, well, is there anything you would have done differently, anything you would have done more of while you were at it, so that we don't just see what they end up passing, but now that they've had some time to let them play to see if there's anything they would have done differently.
Okay, so the staff direction is clear? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And just a second, to the public, you're able to make comments to our staff, to John Ely or to our county manager and say, as you considering this licensing procedure, would you please consider this for this reason? So you can go forward with that in mind, that you might have some particular addition to the licensing procedure that you'd like to see Pickens County do, and you can make that as a suggestion. You might not have mentioned it today, but you'll think of it, and you can pass those comments on to our staff. So, Jack, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you. I have a question. George kind of started me thinking along these lines about the scope of quote-unquote operations in Pickens County currently. I understand there's also a moratorium, so either of you gentlemen, appreciate it if you answer. There's a moratorium now, so no one can apply for a new license of any sort in the three areas, right? Dispensaries, grow, and products.
Yeah.
Products. Okay, so does that mean that anyone that is in business currently had to have met that July 2010 deadline?
Correct.
So there's nothing in between. So whatever existed. So we ought to have an understanding of what the scope is, and I'm not sure how to go about getting that, but we have X amount of population in our county. We have, the market usually rules as to demand. So, I'm not going to say that there's a straight path to any answers here, but I'm trying to figure out what is the scope. We have maybe 6 dispensaries, maybe X amount of grow sites, etc. So I would join in George's question in trying to get a handle on what in fact is in Pickens County now. Is that something the state can share with us?
Absolutely.
As applications? Because that would give us the current information, bottom line.
Yeah, I can simply just assign a staff member to work with Lance to compare notes with what we have in our database compared to what you have in your database, and we should be able to through some mental gymnastics, be able to figure out what's where within the county, keeping in mind that everything that's in Pickens County, even if it's an Aspen licensing authority, is going to be in there, so we'll have to do some picking through the data to see what's really here and what's not, and just compare notes essentially.
I sincerely appreciate that. Rob also brought up the question of what is the City of Aspen's licensing, and I certainly would agree with that because we're a local community with the same local people involved. So, Rachel, Michael, what I'm trying to do is think of what to make sure next time we have a meeting, we've covered all the bases up to this point. Things will evolve, we know. But I certainly like the idea of doing some research in other counties to find out what some standards, and I am inclined to go for the minimal standards, certainly. And then we'll have a discussion about Rob. I can point to each of us because we made comments in areas. I'm not picking anyone, I'm just thoughtfully, Rob brought this up. Yeah, well, what does it mean? George's comments relative to caucuses. Caucuses are an important element of feedback recommendations in our county. They do not set policy, we do. But their opinions are going to be important. But not everyone is involved in caucuses, etc. So we have 17,000 people we represent, and plus out-of-town homeowners, etc., and that whole thing. So a question, can anyone living out of state, say a second homeowner, to use an example, get a marijuana, medical marijuana card? Or you have to be a state resident? That I don't know.
That's a standard that's upheld over at Colorado Department of Health and Environment. I'm not overly familiar with that. I would imagine if they can show a residence here, driver's license, etc., they may be able to get a card.
I know, if you'd like to know the answer.
Yes, Lauren, go ahead.
If I may. You can show actually an out-of-state ID, you can show a passport. You do not actually have to be a local resident. You do have to be able to show that if you don't have a local license, then you must show that out-of-state ID or a passport with a utility bill, a medical bill, or something that shows for a service performed in Colorado with a medical bill going to your home in Colorado. So does it have to be a permanent resident? No.
And not that that's totally relevant, but I thought of, when I made the statement, 17,000 people, well, golly, we also represent all those second homeowners. You know.
And those are possible
Yeah.
medical marijuana card holders.
So, yeah, I look forward to further discussion in this and getting some real basic information to start with.
Okay, yes, Rachel.
Just since you brought it up and while we have you here, what is the nature of the moratorium? Who passed it? Did it have a timeline before it runs out? And what was the purpose of the moratorium, as you understand it?
The original moratorium was set to end July 1st of 2011. In the most recent legislative session at the beginning of last year, they extended it by another year because it was clear that the bite off the regulatory apple was quite large, and it was going to take a while for us to be able to get through everything that we needed to. It's along the same lines. Everybody needs to understand everything we're working at right now, the surveillance, the inventory controls, they're all a work in process. They're all things that we're working to implement and bring in that compliance. But that July 1st, 2012 date's currently, according to statute, when we can begin to start accepting new applications.
So that could be changed in the new legislative session or extended?
It could. I'm not familiar with any legislation at this point that's going to be addressing that. We're working internally to have as much done as we possibly can coming into late April, early May, so we can gear up for whatever is going to happen within the industry, whether that's a new wave of applicants or a new wave of ownership changes or what. We're not sure. We just know that going forward, any new application that comes in is going to be, they're definitely going to be dealing with some more stringent barriers to entry because it's not going to be available. You're not going to be able to open your doors with a local approval and a state application. You're going to have both local and state licensing, meaning that we're going to come in and look at your surveillance. We're going to make sure that your inventory controls are in place, which may at that point be the radio frequency ID tagging that we're working on and the set of new rules that Lauren had. So we have a lot of things that we're trying to gear up for, but we're expecting to see all that coming in, but the barriers to entry may kind of dampen a little bit what I think there's a couple different schools of thought on it. We're going to get a huge new influx, and then there's another school of thought that says we don't. That we get a lot of new applications from jurisdictions that put a moratorium in place. And so they're opening up applications for the first time.
Do people's license with you, with the state, have to be renewed every year? And they have to be renewed locally every year?
Correct. Well, the currently, it's for the state, it's an annual licensing. And we intend on keeping it that way until we can feel like we've done everything we need to get everyone in compliance. And so that's where we stand right now. We always are working with local jurisdictions to try and align expiration dates, so it becomes a little easier for the applicant to be able to get everything taken care of at one shot. The downside being that all of the licensing fees come due at one time, so it makes it a little more difficult.
Okay. So that being the case, I think we'll end this hearing at this point.
If you don't mind, just one quick little thing. I just want to make us available to you.
Well, thank you.
So as you start to continue down this road, your staff, any questions that you have as commissioners, anything that myself or Brian can do for you. If we don't have the answers, and we don't have you here behind us to help with some of the statutes, we can always go and get answers for you and try and provide whatever clarification we can for you, because we know it's a difficult process. There's a lot of things that have to be considered, and we know that we can help be a resource for you, because like myself and Brian, we've been here almost since we were a division, so we're happy to help you in whatever way we can.
Well, thank you for that offer, and we'll certainly take you up on it. And thank you for being here today. It's very helpful. Okay, so we'll call it at least the end of this portion of the hearing. And do we have anything else on our agenda? And thank the public. Thank you, public. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, and look forward to public hearings when we get to the actual regs. Thank you.
Fun time.
Look forward to. Appreciate your time the other day.
Everybody, we're still in session here, so if you could just leave quietly, because we just have to end this meeting and then...
So, John, is there anything further we want to follow up on today?
No, I don't have anything else for you.
Thank you, Lance. John, thank you. Jake, O-H-N.
Not me?
And J-O-N. Thank you.
Meeting adjourned?
I think we'll adjourn the meeting. This is good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Grassroots, CGTV.
Michael, can you grab 5 minutes of your time before
Yeah, and I mean, really, supplies, the doctor said, hey, we're not